Chapter 598. Looking at the social status of Jiang Pingji's subordinates. Feng Jin had the highest status. He was the second legitimate son of Dongqing's Feng family. Wei Xi was the descendant of a declining aristocratic family. The Wei family of Hejian had moved to Zhongzhao's Bianzhou. He was alone now. Feng Jin's family was in decline. His parents died early, and his relatives were unreliable. He was a wastrel. Other than the three above, the social status of the others was even lower. Judging from the structure of these people, Jiang Pingji currently did not have the capital to attract talents to join her. However, if the Feng family expressed their attitude and was willing to stand on her side, the situation would be different. Even without Wei Xi tricking Peng, there would be capable people who would take the initiative to join her. They even lined up to join her. This was the appeal and reputation of the Feng family among the nobles. Suke knew the hidden dangers. He hoped that Jiang Pingji could weigh the pros and cons carefully. If he agreed easily, wouldn't he be nurturing a tiger and inviting trouble? Jiang Pingji actually said that a family that could jump ship at any time was insignificant? My lord, this is not like you. Suke shook his head with a puzzled expression. This was not like his lord's style. Letting the Feng family go meant sending a lot of talents and resources to a strong enemy in the future. At that moment, Jiang Pingji's streaming room was still open. There were experts in ancient Chinese among the audience. They translated the contents of the letter and analyzed the inside story. Although the audience was an onlooker, they had read many novels about politics and intrigue. There were many conspiracy theories and tricks. Jintian Sanging. Streamer, isn't it too much of a loss for you to agree to this condition? According to the handsome Feng Zhen, the military forces in Shangyang County won't last until next summer. You can directly attack Shangyang County, and it won't cost much. It's enough to capture the Feng family. If they find another way out in the future and backstab you in the back, it'll be too painful. It's better to be ruthless now and take preventive measures. Jintian Sanging. Don't be anxious. The streamer must have her own considerations. Which expert can analyze it? Watching this streaming room, I feel that my IQ is not enough. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to find Taobao to increase my IQ by $100. Guikai Guofengxiu. I think that the streamer is doing the right thing. Inyuejia Zhugachinma. You're shameless. You really think you're Guijia. Guikai Guofengxiu. To the one above, if I didn't kneel down early, would there be a time when the world is divided? The live stream wasn't a peaceful place either, because the same ID challenged each other every day. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Young people nowadays are not reliable. Let me analyze it and get the gist of it. First of all, do you still remember the strategy that the host made before? She wanted to weaken the power of the aristocratic families. In the early stages of development, she definitely couldn't let the aristocratic families take too much initiative. If the Feng family joined the alliance, she would probably be more passive. Secondly, the Feng family had entered the game so early and attracted too much hatred. As the saying goes, the bird that sticks out gets shot. If Prince Changshu and the emperor joined forces to get rid of her, and then started a civil war, what would happen then? Thirdly, Feng Jin is still working under the host, and they are good friends. Even if I don't give face to the monk, I still have to give face to the Feng family. Although I feel that the third reason is a bit nonsensical, and the host isn't the kind of person who is soft-hearted, but adding it makes her seem more humane. Guikai Guofengxiu. Of course, the most important thing is that the Feng group doesn't like the streamer. When this bullet screen was sent out, it was followed by a string of 666. That's hurtful, old friend. And what kind of big truth are you saying? Jiang Pingji secretly took a deep breath and resisted the urge to grab these people and beat them up. Don't they know that people who are too honest usually don't live long? A melon that is forcefully twisted won't be sweet. Instead, it will taste bitter and make one's mouth dry. She snorted. It wasn't that she didn't know the importance of the Feng family, but she knew that they couldn't be forced. Instead of incurring hatred, why don't we go with the flow and form a good relationship with them? Your lord is broad-minded. Not only can she row a boat, but she can also race on dragon boats. I agree to this condition. To show my sincerity, I will personally make a trip to Shenyang. Absolutely not. How can the Lord leave without permission? Su-ku the housekeeper couldn't sit still. How could the big boss not stay in his nest and run around? Wasn't she afraid of being caught and killed by others? Jiang Pengji snorted and said, "Oh, if I don't go to Shenyang County, why you will dare to come back after the new year?" Su-ku was speechless. Why was his lord still thinking about this matter? Feng Zhen burst out laughing. He said, "I'm really worried. If the Lord goes to Shenyang, I'm afraid you won't want to come back after the new year." Using the excuse of arresting employees who were absent from work, his lord was really sneaking away. Jiang Pingji secretly glared at Feng Zhen. Couldn't this guy be a little more tacit? Su-ku still wanted to struggle and persuade her, but Wei Ci said, "If the Lord goes to Shenyang County, have you thought about who you want to bring along?" The situation was hopeless. Su-ku was extremely tired. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, "I originally thought that when Zheng is steady and experienced, it would be more reliable to go there to suppress the situation. But considering that he has been separated from his wife for more than a year, and now that he and his wife have finally reunited, I won't be a nuisance. The others have their own duties and can't leave easily. Why don't you go with me, Zixiao? But with your health, can you withstand the fatigue of the long journey?" Wei Ci's expression changed. He said, "I'm fine, but I'm busy with government affairs. I'm afraid I won't be able to leave. Why don't we let Zixia?" Jiang Pengji cut him off and said, "Your body is still recuperating. It can't withstand heavy worldly tasks. Just throw it to Jingrong. Anyway, he can do the work of two people. It'd be a waste not to use him. You're very meticulous. I have high hopes for you." Wei Ci was speechless. Yang Si, who had been singled out as a waste not to use him, laughed coldly. He was still in the government office. Did he think he was transparent? What did he mean by it'd be a waste not to use him? Didn't his conscience hurt? Yang Si hadn't agreed to join them yet, but he was attracted by the delicacies and couldn't bear to leave for a while. Relying on the delicacies, he had nothing to fear and recklessly exploited his labor. How could Lu Shi be so thick-skinned? Did he know how to write the word thick-skinned? Su-ku had high hopes for Wei Ci. He had to keep his lord in check, and not let anything happen to her. When one was outside, and not in one's own territory, one would feel that everything was dangerous. When the 16 countries were in chaos, how did the feudal vassal forces, that had the most hope of competing with the founding ancestor of Xia, disintegrate? It was all because that feudal vassal was fond of hunting. He thought that he was highly skilled in martial arts, and went out to roam freely. Then he was shot in the heart by his enemy. Without a backbone, the heirs fought among themselves, the officials rebelled, and the huge forces fell apart. He was afraid that Jiang Pingji would also encounter such an accident. It wasn't safe outside. Although the Red Lotus Group and the Tsingy army were in decline, there were still many mobs on the run. Jiang Pingji didn't worry about this. Everything was light and simple. There were only 40 to 50 guards. To ensure that the rear was guarded, she only brought Dian Yan, Feng Zhen, and Wei Ci. The one in the middle was purely because she was thick-skinned. Chapter 599. This is so unfair. The first snow had already fallen, and the intensity of the snow seemed to be increasing. Feng Zhen was so cold that he wanted to shiver. He couldn't help but search his hands for warmth. Because he had consumed too much hanshi powder in his early years, his fingernails were an unhealthy greenish-white color, his fingertips exuding a frightening chill. Jiang Pingji rode on Little White. She turned her head and asked him, "What's unfair?" Feng Zhen's eyes turned to the side. His hands clutched the reins awkwardly, and he also had to prevent the drifting snow from entering his collar. "Why is it that Zixiao can stay in the carriage, but I have to ride a horse? Is it called tempering the body? We're all sickly, so please don't treat us differently." Thinking about the unfair treatment he had received after leaving the city, Feng Zhen felt very wronged. Feng Zhen had already slowly gotten rid of the hanshi powder, and now he would not relapse even once in half a month. Even if he were to relapse, he would be able to slowly get over it with his own willpower. It was just that his damaged body still needed to be nursed back to health, so his daily alcohol intake was restricted. He had thought that he would be free once he came out, and could have a good time. Who knew that his lord would be so biased? Wei Xi was a treasure, and he was a blade of grass. This was reflected in the fact that he could sit in a carriage, drink hot water, enjoy snacks. These benefits had nothing to do with him. Jiang Pingji smiled. Her phoenix eyes squinted in enjoyment. She steered her horse closer to Feng Zhen and said meaningfully, Zisher, have you ever heard of this saying? Your honey is another's frost? Feng Zhen was also a clever person, and his comprehension ability was not bad. There was some doubt and confusion on his face. You said that Zixiao also wants to exchange with me? Why? Riding a horse in the middle of winter was simply a kind of torture. The wind and snow were still blowing outside, and no matter how many layers of clothes one wore, one would still feel bone-chilling cold. Wei Xi's physique was not as good as his. How could he be crazy enough to want to ride a horse? Jiang Pingji smiled faintly. About that I can't say. Feng Zhen thought about it, but he still didn't understand. In the end he just gave up. He said, I don't care anymore. I want to enjoy life in the carriage, and he wants to suffer outside. Why don't we swap places and have the best of both worlds? Jiang Pingji added, I won't allow it. He won't exchange with you. Feng Zhen, who was about to retreat, paused. He asked her in a lazy and direct manner. Why? He's better looking than you. If Zixiao's lips turn purple from the cold wind, my heart will ache. Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. She did not hide the fact that she was obsessed with good looks. If Zisher shivers in the cold, not only will I not feel sorry for him, I can even laugh at you. As long as it was something that Jiang Pingji was unwilling to do, even if Wei Xi was against it in his heart, he would still be obedient verbally. Feng Zhen wanted to switch places with Wei Xi. If Jiang Pingji didn't agree, Wei Xi would never leave the carriage. Feng Zhen almost couldn't maintain the expression on his face. He hadn't expected that his lord was not only shameless, but also had a foul mouth. Her ability to play dirty was even deeper than his. He was not as good-looking as Wei Xi, but did a man need to be so good-looking? Was there a need? The answer was necessary, because this was a world where appearances mattered, and he still had a lord who mattered. The audience in the streaming room praised Jiang Pingji's straightforwardness. They also felt sorry for Feng Zhen. Jintian Dazigung. Ha ha ha, I love such an honest streamer. She says whatever she wants to say. Talent Juan Huanda. System. Your good friend Feng Zhen's favorability towards you has dropped by 233 points. You are currently in a state of hatred. Sampai Shidiozo. My lord, my heart hurts. This world where appearances mattered is cold and heartless. Chun Zue Xia Wu Qiu Wu Li. With the streamer's honest mouth, will it really not anger your strategist and drive him away? Can't wake up Dong Sanyue. I watch the streamer dissing people every day. Those who can scold her can't beat her. And those who can beat her haven't been born yet? Reality proved that Feng Zhen was a joker. He often provoked Jiang Pingji, but she was not allowed to retaliate. A thought flashed through Feng Zhen's mind. He whispered to her, raising his eyebrows. He seemed to have some hidden meaning. He joked, could it be that my lord is also interested in that? That's not easy. Zixiao still has to get married and have children to carry on the family line. Jiang Pingji looked at him with disdain. What's in your head? Can't I simply admire other people's beauty? Feng Zhen couldn't continue. He thought about Wei Xi's face. It was very stunning when he first saw it. But after getting familiar with it, he didn't feel anything. Jiang Pingji added, this is human nature. If it were you, would you bear to let a beauty suffer in the cold wind? Beauty equals Wei Xi. Feng Zhen seemed to have thought of something. He examined Jiang Pingji seriously and said sternly, Zixiao is a real man. He is serious and has a sensitive personality. My lord, please tell me these jokes. I'm just a wanderer. I don't mind meat and vegetables, because I won't take it seriously. It's not worth the taboo of a conversation. But if Zixiao hears it, he won't say anything on the surface, but his thoughts will definitely run wild. If Jiang Pingji was as muddle-headed as Wei Xi, she would definitely be courting death. Seeing this, Jiang Pingji replied, I know what I'm doing. I won't go overboard. I've experienced Zixiao's temper a few years ago. How would I dare to purposely be muddle-headed and make him angry? I'm just joking with you in private. You won't tell him about this, will you? Wei Si was a little princess. Jiang Pingji would crack a little joke, but she would never go overboard. She had been pinching the right size. Seeing that Jiang Pingji was serious, Feng Zhen heaved a sigh of relief. If it was just a joke, he naturally wouldn't be worried. The alarm was lifted. Feng Zhen teased. My lord, you are very knowledgeable. Zixiao's looks are rare in this world. If he is the standard, how many people in the world will be overshadowed? Jiang Pingji secretly despised Feng Zhen. Just now, he was seriously advising her not to cause a ruckus. Now he turned around and teased Wei Si's appearance. Indeed, he had no integrity. When Jiang Pingji heard Feng Zhen call himself a wanderer, she pouted. Sleeping with women all year round? You call yourself a wastrel, but you're flattering yourself. When he was reckless, he was even more of a hooligan than a prodigal son. Feng Zhen had an expression that said, You're just a kid and you don't understand. Kids don't understand. This is called maturity. When the Lord grew older and understood the matters between men and women, she wouldn't say that. Living in this world, one's first needs were clothing, food, shelter and transportation, followed by eating, drinking and playing. The sage also said that food and lust were natural. When men reach an age, they like women, and women like men. How normal is that? Jiang Pingji ridiculed him coldly. According to what you said, are those men who like men considered normal? Feng Zhen clicked his tongue and said in disdain, I'm not attracted to men, but men are also lustful. Naturally, it's normal. Jiang Pingji was speechless. This person was so thick-skinned that he could block an energy cannon. She frowned and thought of something. Tell me, if you have a conflict with someone, how should you coax them back? Chapter 600. We can be considered good friends. We had some misunderstandings a while ago. Didn't you say that you're a playboy with no experience? Feng Zhen sneered. My lord is still a green fledgling. I'm a playboy who plays around with women. All I get are warm and fragrant. Friendship is different from love between a man and a woman. Has my lord angered a close confidant, or has she angered a close friend? Jiang Pingji was speechless. After a moment of silence, she asked Little White to walk faster and said, I don't want to answer. Feng Zhen laughed heartily. Could it be that my lord is shy? It was obviously useless to ask Feng Zhen for advice. This guy was not serious. The audience in the streaming room volunteered. 3 heads were better than Zhuge Liang. They had 150,000 onlookers. How could they not complete this task? The two of them chatted enthusiastically. When it came to happy topics, Feng Zhen laughed so hard that he rocked back and forth. He had no intention of being reserved. In the carriage, Wei Si lifted the curtain and opened the window from time to time. The cold air that rushed into his face made him choke violently. He vaguely saw 2 figures on horseback in front of the group. He let out a long sigh. No one knew what he was thinking, but he closed the window with a bang. Out of sight, out of mind. After half a year of reorganization, the other 3 districts of Fengyi County had slowly regained their liveliness. The city walls and streets had been renovated. However, after leaving Fengyi County, the scene outside was shocking. The roadside was filled with white bones. There were no strong men within 100 miles. Only the old, weak, women and children were left in rags. Along the way, they could always find frozen corpses under the thick snow. They were all as thin as firewood and unbearable to look at. Jiang Pingji pressed down on the hood of her windproof cloak. She had already sent the weak Feng Zhen into the carriage. Jokes aside, it was not suitable for Feng Zhen to stay outside for long in this weather. Little White walked slowly with steady footsteps. The bell on his neck rang rhythmically with each step he took. His ponytail swayed. The wind and snow were heavy these few days. They could only choose to travel during the day and rest at night to avoid the wind and snow. It was so inconvenient for them, let alone the people. Next year, I hope the people of Wanzhou will have a place to hide. My lord keeps her words. The people of Wanzhou are blessed. The tip of Wei Si's nose was slightly red from the cold. The group took shelter from the wind and snow in an uninhabited village. Feng Zhen drank a jar of wine, then hugged his blanket, and went to sleep in the carriage. I hope so. Jiang Pingji sat next to the bonfire. She rested her chin on one hand and held a branch in the other to stir the flames. She was confident that she could take over all of Wanzhou next year. But she didn't dare boast that she could provide enough food and clothing for the millions of people in the state. The responsibility was too great. She could only say that she would do her best, but she did not dare to guarantee anything. The wind and snow outside are so heavy, and the weather is so cold. Why don't you stay in the carriage? What are you doing out here in the cold? Jiang Pingji squeezed his hands naturally. His warm palms felt like they were touching a lump of ice. Wei Xi's expression changed. He subconsciously wanted to retract his hand, but how could he do it with that little bit of strength? My lord, he lowered his voice. I've been in the carriage for a day. I'm a little bored, so I came down to take a breather. Jiang Pingji didn't go overboard. She let go of his hands and pointed at the bonfire with a natural expression. Let's warm it up. Your hands are too cold. It's better to stay in the carriage. Look at Zisher. After eating dinner and drinking wine, he refuses to let go of his blanket. He won't get out of the carriage no matter what I say. The walls of the carriage were filled with warm padding, and blankets woven from sheep wool were hung. The bedding and blankets were specially thickened. Even if they didn't use a hot pot or a charcoal basin, even if they only wore light clothes, they wouldn't feel cold. It was obvious that Wei Ci and Feng Zhen's carriage had been specially modified. Not only was it stable, but the interior was also very warm. Wei Ci lowered his eyelids and pursed his lips. He stared at the bonfire in a daze. Have you been at odds with me recently? Jiang Pingji suddenly asked him. Wei Ci was speechless. If he hadn't restrained himself, he would have had the urge to jump and run away. He asked with an ugly expression. Why do you say that, my lord? Intuition, she said. Is it because of what happened with Wenzheng? I just specially instructed him to do something. It's more convenient for him to do it. Wei Ci didn't say a word. He felt that no matter how he answered, it would be wrong. Now, I'm in a rather awkward situation. Jiang Pingji rubbed her face with both hands. She sounded a little sad and pitiful. There's a pack of wolves watching me from behind. I don't even know who's my enemy and who's my friend. Maybe one wrong step, and I'll fall into a bottomless abyss. Wei Ci was moved. Why do you say that, my lord? Is someone trying to harm you? She smiled bitterly. What else? There are people who want my life. 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, both openly and in the dark. I know who the traitor is, but I can't do anything to her. It's not that I don't have the ability to do anything, but I can't. Once I do, I'll alert the enemy. It's really frustrating. Wei Ci's heartstrings were tugged. He looked at her in a daze. Was this person's situation so difficult in the early stages? How was that possible? When Wei Ci followed her in his previous life, she was already the overlord of one of the few major forces in the world. She annexed the power and territory of Wei Ci's former master. There were very few people in the world who could stop her from ascending to the throne. In the next few years, she swept across the world. Now, although the beginning was different, shouldn't it be smoother with her identity as a member of the gentry? So, for my lord, Wenzheng is someone worth entrusting your life to? Jiang Pingji said. Wenzheng can be entrusted with his family, but you can entrust your life. Wei Ci's expression changed. He quickly turned his face away, feeling uncomfortable all over. Just now, he felt that the temperature of the campfire was not high enough. Now he felt hot and uncomfortable. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He found a lame reason to slip away. Jiang Pingji looked at his disheveled figure as he walked away. She held her chin and muttered. Is the suggestion of those onlookers to sell their misery really feasible? It seemed that the effect was not bad. The audience in the streaming room did not know who Jiang Pingji was making friends with. They gathered their wisdom and effort, and came up with more than 10 plans. The most feasible one was to secretly reveal some tragic facts, to make people soft-hearted. It was called selling misery. As long as the atmosphere was right, it would definitely make people soft-hearted. Not to mention that Jiang Pingji's style had always been tough. If she suddenly sold misery, the effect would be outstanding. The next day, Feng Zhen noticed that Jiang Pingji had a faint smile on her face. She was in a good mood. Feng Zhen frowned and asked, My lord is in a good mood? Yes. Feng Zhen felt the breath of spring. It snowed heavily for 3 consecutive days. The accumulated snow could almost cover half of one's calf. The carriage wheels rolled over the snow, making a crunching sound. Feng said worriedly, "The snow is so heavy. Will it crush the houses?" "It's fine. My lord already has a plan to deal with it." Wei Xi was not worried at all. Xiangyang district had done a good job in dealing with the accumulated snow last year. This year, it was spread throughout Fengyi County. Chapter 601. My lord, the snow is too heavy. I'm afraid there's no way to take a shortcut. For the sake of safety, it's safer to take the main road. Wei Xi looked at the snow. The snowflakes were as big as feathers. They floated on his face and stuck close to him. Not long after, they turned into ice water. Jiang Pingji could only nod her head helplessly. The snowstorm was too strong, and the accumulated snow was too deep. Not only did it make it more difficult to travel, but it also slowed them down. The snow had covered half of their calves. Regardless of whether it was the horse or the carriage, they had to carefully check the path before moving forward to avoid falling into a pit. Now that they were in the middle of nowhere, if they were to encounter such an unlucky accident, it would be terrible. Jiang Pingji looked at the bleak sky outside, and could only nod in agreement. They had been on the road for the past few days, and the live stream viewers were bored as well. They would chat and joke around as usual to kill time. Jiang Pingji was also bored. Feng Zhen was afraid of the cold, so he hid in the carriage. Wei Xi wanted to come out, but she chased him back. Fortunately, she had a live broadcast room with her, and the 150,000 idle people could chat and joke with her. Don't dare to eat dinner. Although ancient technology is backward, the environment is very clean. If it were us, we wouldn't know if the snow falling from the sky was white or black snow. When he was young, he used to have snowball fights with his friends. Now he couldn't think about it anymore. Yingji is Wishuo. I'm so envious that you can have a snowball fight. My hometown is in the south. It's the southern water town. I've never seen snow since I was young. Watching cartoons or romantic dramas, the protagonists would play in the snow, have snowball fights, or build snowmen, and they would be super envious. Nianji Hao. What's there to be envious about? Cartoons are all lies. Which romance drama doesn't have filters? Watching the male and female leads laughing and frolicking in the snow. This was only in a romance drama. In reality, the cleaning auntie would have already shoveled away the snow. Tian Xiuxian. It's not easy being a cleaner. They swept away the snow, so they could only imagine making a snowman and having a snowball fight. If you don't, do you know how dirty the ground will be after the snow melts? It had been stepped on until it was black and dirty. Riri Feisheng. But the host doesn't have a cleaner. Why don't they have a snowball fight or make a snowman? Regarding this suggestion, Jiang Pingji gave 2 words of wisdom. Hostvi, so ugly. Jiang Pingji was so straightforward that the audience in the streaming room felt another wave of heartache. The snow was boundless, and there was only the sound of wheels and horses' hooves running over the snow, and the howling of the wind. From time to time, Jiang Pingji raised her hand to flick away the accumulated snow on her cloak, to prevent the snow from melting and wetting the cloak. Your Highness, there's someone lying on the official road ahead. He's still breathing. Jiang Pingji was not in a hurry. If she found someone lying in the snow and still breathing, she would definitely think of a way to save him. The soldiers at the front were scouting the way. Firstly, it was to ensure that the carriages and horses could pass smoothly. Secondly, it was to ensure that there might be survivors. Jiang Pingji frowned and said, "Save them and put them in the carriage at the back." The soldier looked troubled. He said, "My lord, that person seems to be a disciple of the Red Lotus Group." The Red Lotus Group? Jiang Pingji raised her brows. The Tsingyi army was causing trouble in Fengyi County and Xiangyang County, but the Red Lotus Group's influence was in Qingde County and other places. So far, she had only fought with the Tsingyi army. She had not had much contact with the Red Lotus Group. "Are you sure?" she asked. The soldier replied, "There's a flame-shaped tattoo on the front of that person's arm. It's one of the symbols of the Red Lotus Group." Flame-shaped tattoo? She thought about the information related to the Red Lotus Group. In the Red Lotus Group, The most ordinary members were the people who occupied the territory. They prayed to the gods worshipped by the Red Lotus group every day. Apart from being exploited a little, they could still manage to get by. Compared to the violence of the Tsingy army, the Red Lotus group was soft violence and brainwash people. Those who were slightly more advanced were the small members. They would wear a token with a flame-shaped tattoo on their body to prove their identity. Those who were slightly more advanced were the apostles who managed these small members. They would have a flame-shaped tattoo on their arm. Even though the apostles couldn't be considered small leaders, they still had 100 or so commoners under them. "My lord, should we save him?" Jiang Pingji said. "Yes, but let's get some information from that person. Don't you think it's very suspicious that an apostle of the Red Lotus group fainted in a world of ice and snow? Remember not to let him escape. Send someone to keep a close eye on him." The soldier cupped his fists and responded. After inspection, the man with the Red Lotus group's symbol on his arm had fainted from hunger. That was why he had collapsed in the snow. If they hadn't happened to pass by, the man might have been buried in the snow in another 2 to 4 hours and frozen to death without a sound. Wei Xiai asked when he heard the commotion outside. Jiang Pingji turned her head and said, "It's nothing. We found a guy from the Red Lotus group, who fainted from hunger in the snow. We saved him. He didn't think too much about it. As long as it wasn't an assassin targeting her, it was fine." Ever since Jiang Pingji acted pitifully last night, Wei Xiai had carefully integrated and analyzed all the information he knew. He was more and more surprised. He thought that Jiang Pingji had a good start, and that all the changes were in her favor. Now that he had heard her heartfelt words, he felt that things were not that simple. These changes were not all good. Maybe it was related to the demon that Master Liaochen mentioned. How did the current history differ from the past he knew? He thought it was Lu Shi, but when he looked back, he overturned his guess. Unfortunately, he left Dongqing too early in his previous life. He only had a rough understanding of the situation in Dongqing. Hearing that the soldier had saved another person, Wei Xiai didn't pay much attention. When the night gradually darkened, Jiang Pingji and the others had to find a place to shelter from the wind for the night. The man who had been rescued had also woken up. The soldier cooked soft porridge for him as instructed. He had been starving for a long time, so it was not advisable to eat too greasy food or to eat too much. Warm porridge was suitable to warm his stomach. The soldier secretly tried to get information from the man, but he didn't know that the man was extremely vigilant. He didn't reveal anything for half a day. Helpless, the soldier could only go back and report to Jiang Pingji. "My lord, I'm guessing that the man isn't an ordinary person." "Oh, why do you say so?" Jiang Pingji skewered the cold steamed bun and roasted it over the fire. It was roasted until the outside was sticky. Then she carefully put it to her mouth and took a bite. The soldier said, "This lowly one has probed him several times. This person is extremely vigilant." He ate 2 bowls of porridge in a row. He was obviously very hungry, but the way he ate was quite refined. The way he talked and behaved. He doesn't look like an ordinary person. He looks more like an educated and cultured person. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She was vaguely interested. "Summon that man. I'll interrogate him personally." In fact, there was no need to specifically get information out of him. There were too few people who could keep secrets in front of Jiang Pingji. The man who had been rescued was nearly 30 years old. His long hair was tied up on his head with a hemp rope. It was unknown how many days it had been since he washed. Even though it was winter, there was an indescribable stench on his body. His hair was even more stuck together in bundles, floating with dust. His fingernails had not been trimmed for at least a month. There was a thick layer of dirt on his skin. He looked like a tramp, but Jiang Pingji became vigilant the moment she saw him. Chapter 602. Because of hunger. The man's figure was quite thin, but from the exposed skin on his arms, it could be seen that he had been trained. The thick calluses on his right hand could also prove that he had practiced martial arts for a long time. The slightly deformed knuckles on his right hand showed that he had learned to read and write. Regardless of his level of education, he could at least be considered to be a master of both literature and martial arts. His feet were tied with worn-out straw sandals, and the clothes on his body could no longer be called clothes to protect him from the cold. At most they were rags. Such a harsh living environment caused the man to have severe frostbite. Even looking at it would hurt. But the man reacted calmly. Either he was in so much pain that he couldn't feel it, or he was determined enough to endure it. The soldiers also said that he had a good table manners. How could a man who was so hungry that he fainted on the side of the road and was almost buried in the thick snow hold himself back when he saw hot food? Not only did the man hold himself back, but he also integrated his cultivation into his bones. Even though he had fallen to the lowest point of his life, he still maintained the little bit of self-esteem he had. Jiang Pingji glanced at the person's face. He was not the peaceful type. His facial features were a little aggressive. However, the vicissitudes of life had slightly smoothed out his arrogance. He had some indifference after experiencing vicissitudes of life, but his eyes were still filled with unyielding light. To use an analogy, the man was like a severely injured wolf. Even though he was about to die, he still aimed at the enemy's throat unwillingly. However, clothes make the man. An image was very important. No matter how rich and graceful the man was before the accident, now that he had not bathed for more than half a year, his image was still unsightly. She thought about it and already understood a lot. She wanted to investigate further, but the man had already thanked her in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. If Jiang Pingji hadn't sent someone to save him, his body would have been cold. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "No need to be so polite. I can see that you were probably born in a rich family before you fell." After that, she asked someone to bring a set of clean clothes for the man to keep warm. Due to the limited conditions, the clothes could not be brand new, but the clothes were clean and warm, and it was more suitable for the man's body. The man's eyes were a little gloomy and alienated. No matter how Jiang Pingji tried to get information out of him, he only answered the unimportant questions. To others, he did not reveal any important information, but to Pingji, she had already gathered enough information. Apart from her previous analysis, Jiang Pingji confirmed a few more key pieces of information based on her probing. This man was not a native of Dongqing. His hometown had been invaded by foreign tribes. He also mocked himself as a stray dog. The only place that met the criteria was Nansheng, which had already been conquered by the 4 factions of Nanman. The man's southern accent also proved this point. Jiang Pingji probed a few times and stopped. The man secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, the soldier had already found a set of clean clothes. Other than a set of inner clothes, there was also a set of warm woolen sweaters. Jiang Pingji said, "The people downstairs boiled some water. If you don't think it's troublesome, you can wash yourself with hot water first before changing your clothes. It'll be warmer this way. Now that the weather is so cold, I can see that you have severe frostbite. If you don't treat it carefully and recuperate, you will suffer in the future." Even though she appeared to be very harmless and warm, the man's guard did not drop. However, he was penniless and had fallen into such dire straits. He had lost his home and country. How could he be worth the schemes of this young noble? The man secretly mocked her in his heart and thanked Jiang Pingji for her kindness. He had forgotten how long it had been since he had washed himself. Not to mention bathing, even wiping himself with warm water, had been a few months ago. The soldier boiled the snow water into hot water. The man carefully cleaned himself in an idle carriage. The soldier who changed the water for him could not help but be speechless. How much dirt did this man have on his body? He had stained the snow-white cloth into a grayish-black color. The basin of hot water had to be changed several times. When he changed it for the first time, the water was black. It was disgusting to look at. It gradually became clear after washing a few basins. "This is the ointment that the Lord ordered me to prepare for you. It's quite effective in treating frostbite." The winter in the north was very cold and long. Many people would develop frostbite. It was cold and painful. If they did not take good care of themselves and had to come back once a year, they would suffer for the rest of their lives. Therefore, the people in the north would prepare some ointment if they could afford it. "Thank you very much." At first, the man only wanted to wipe himself a little. However, he could not hold himself back once he started. He simply washed his long hair carefully. The soldier said, "You're lucky to have met my lord. If it had been someone else, I'm afraid they would have already met the king of hell. The man had a stiff smile on his face, and did not say a word. Seeing that he did not respond, the soldier secretly muttered in his heart. He was a little unhappy. This person's reaction was too cold. He did not expect him to be deeply grateful. But he did not have to be so cold, right? He boiled several pots of hot water back and forth, all for his bath. One had to know that even his lord and a few masters were not so extravagant. At most, they would wipe for 2 days and wash for 5 days. This was also winter. If it had been summer, his body would have emitted a rotten smell. Feng pulled Wei Xiai along to play chess in the carriage. He was a little curious when he heard the soldiers discussing in a low voice outside. Haha, our lord is a classic example of not waking up early if there are no benefits. If there are no benefits to be gained, why would the lord be so kind? I'm curious. What's the background of that person? For the lord to treat him so well, he must not be a small character. Although Feng spent most of his time fooling around, his mind was clear. He understood Jiang Pingji's routine. However, he could meet a big shot just by going out. Wasn't his luck a little too good? As he spoke, Feng put on a cloak to protect himself from the cold, and wrapped himself tightly. Only then did he carefully get off the carriage. Wei Xiai had no choice but to get off the carriage. Feng did not beat around the bush, and directly asked about the man's identity. Jiang Pingji looked at Feng who was confidently watching a good show. She then looked at Wei Xiai, who was half a step behind Feng She was amused. Look at you guys. You don't look like you're here to watch a good show. You look more like close friends bringing people to catch adultery. Jiang Pingji teased. Feng was not ashamed, but Wei Xi's heart skipped a beat. She continued. That person is a noble from Nansheng. I think his family background is not low. Nansheng? Feng raised his eyebrows and sneered. Nansheng? Wasn't it gone a long time ago? How many years has it taken for Nansheng to go from a strong and prosperous country to a weak and destroyed country? He had courted death himself. Not only had the royal family been destroyed, he had also implicated thousands of innocent citizens of the Nansheng kingdom. Chapter 603. Feng smiled and said, From the looks of it, it might be a big fish that slipped through the net. According to Jiang Pingji's character, would she be so attentive if there was no profit to be gained? As it turned out, Jiang Pingji was really wrong this time. She didn't plan to scheme against that person. She just helped him out of curiosity. She understood the mockery in Feng words and said helplessly, You are such a boring person. In your eyes, is your lord someone who pursues fame and fortune? You don't allow me to be kind and take the initiative to lend a helping hand to save these pitiful people? It's not all for the sake of profit. Feng was afraid of the cold, so he wrapped his cloak tightly around his body. He shivered slightly as he breathed out white air, but his mouth refused to back down. My lord has too many criminal records. I can't help but be suspicious. Wei Xiai frowned. Since he's from Nansheng, why did he come to Dongqing and join the Red Lotus group? No matter how much trouble the Red Lotus group and the Tsingy army caused in the north of Dongqing, in the eyes of many people, they were just a group of disorderly people. Moreover, the Red Lotus group bewitched people everywhere and propagated evil cults and evil gods. The Tsingy army was violent and unscrupulous. Everywhere they passed, they were like locusts passing through. It wasn't just the landowning gentry who looked down on them. Even the common people were more disdainful and cursing than praising when they mentioned the two rebel armies. Jiang Pingji shook her head and said, Who knows what they're thinking? Maybe they want to borrow troops from Dongqing to recover Nansheng. It was also possible that he had fled here and could only conceal his identity and hide among the people. Now that Dongqing is in such a mess, it's a good time to fish in troubled waters. Her words made Wei Xi's heart tighten, and his face turned slightly pale. The Red Lotus group of Dongqing, the descendants of Nansheng, borrowing troops to restore the country, fishing in troubled waters. These keywords gave him an ominous feeling. What's wrong, Zixiao? You don't look very well. Jiang Pingji keenly noticed that Wei Xi's face had turned pale. His face had lost its color, and there was a tinge of paleness. She could not help but ask with concern, The wind and snow outside are too strong. Go back to the carriage to avoid it. Wei Xi was in a daze for a moment. Hearing Jiang Pingji's words, he came back to his senses and said embarrassedly, "It's okay, it's an old problem." Of course he couldn't go back now. He had to stay and see who that person was. Just as she was thinking, the man had finished washing up and put on the clean clothes that the soldiers had found for him. The man's stature was similar to that of a soldier, but his clothes were quite suitable for keeping warm and comfortable. However, the area of his frostbite was rather large, and the situation was rather serious. His body was slightly warm, and the area where the frostbite was located was extremely itchy, as if there were countless little worms wriggling and crawling, making people unable to resist scratching. The man restrained his impulse and maintained a natural expression. "My lord, I've brought him here." The soldier brought the man to Jiang Pingji. At that moment, Jiang Pingji was discussing the situation in Nanxing with Feng Zhen and Wei Xi. Nanxing country was indeed destroyed, not to mention the fact that the four factions of Nanman had broken through the borders of Nanxing and had gone straight to the Yellow Dragon, committing numerous crimes along the way. On the day the capital city was breached, the massacre order issued by the four factions of Nanman was enough to make people gnash their teeth in hatred. The scholars of the world were indignant. All the male members of the royal family were beheaded and hung at the top of the city walls. The female members of the royal family were used as camp prostitutes. The younger ones were 3 to 5 years old, and the older ones were 50 to 60 years old. Not a single one was spared. Some women could not bear the humiliation and committed suicide. There were even noble women who carried their young daughters to commit suicide. Rather than dragging out their feeble lives and being humiliated to death, it was better to be freed early and let their souls return to the netherworld. Apart from these unforgettable blood debts, the four factions of Nanman's behavior of using people as food for the army was even more disgusting. After the royal family of Nanxing was destroyed, the aristocratic families of Nanxing had no choice but to unite to resist the four factions of Nanman. As mentioned before, the aristocratic families were very powerful. They were so powerful that they could influence the court and control the succession of emperors. Why was Nanxing still destroyed despite being so powerful? One must know that the aristocratic families each had their own interests. There were also competitive and hostile relationships between them, and they kept each other in check. In the beginning, the aristocratic families of Nanxing did not care whether Nanxing was destroyed or not. There were 3 reasons. First, if the royal family of Nanxing was destroyed, they could elect a new ruler. They did not care at all who would be the emperor. Second, the aristocratic families were arrogant. Although they hated the four factions of Nanman, they did not take these barbaric clans seriously. Third, Nanxing courted disaster by recruiting all kinds of useless allies. They even tried to suppress the aristocratic families and hurt their own interests. Who knew that after Nanxing was destroyed, they did not gain any benefits. The four factions of Nanman were not reasonable at all. They did not care about the value of the aristocratic families. Were the aristocratic families rich? Kill and rob. The aristocratic families had women? Kill and rob. The aristocratic families had rations? Kill and rob. Ever since the four factions of Nanman destroyed Nanxing, they brutally slaughtered countless aristocratic families. The men were brutally killed, while the women were used to satisfy their desires and to carry on the family line. If there was not enough rations, they were cooked and eaten. It was only then that the aristocratic families of Nanxing came to their senses. They recruited soldiers and bought horses. They rose up and rebelled against the cruelty of the four factions of Nanman. Under such circumstances, there would definitely be many who fled to other countries to seek refuge. Jiang Pingji discussed this matter with Wei Xi and Feng Zhen. She also looked down on the four factions of Nanman. Wei Xi said, "My lord, you must not be careless." Jiang Pingji said, "I ridiculed the four factions of Nanman and looked down on them. I did not look down on their combat power. On the contrary, these barbarians were good at fighting. Nanxing's national strength declined, and their policies were wrong. They died without complaint. In troubled times, it was a competition of who could fight and who could win. In this aspect, the four factions of Nanman were indeed stronger than Nansheng. But what about after winning? The four factions of Nanman were stupid. At most, they would flaunt their prowess in the Central Plains for a while. Do they want to establish a stable regime that would last for hundreds of generations? Haha, dream on. Fighting a war was not difficult. What was difficult was rebuilding after the war. A race that only knows how to destroy, but does not know how to preserve, create, and continue is destined to be unpresentable. Jiang Pingji sneered and said, "To put it bluntly, the wheel of fortune changes. Who can be sure that the people of Nanxing will not retaliate? According to the situation of the four factions of Nanman, they are not united internally. If they successfully retaliate, the only thing that awaits them is the annihilation of their race." Hearing this, Feng Zhen frowned and said, "Destroy the four factions of Nanman? According to the current situation of Nansheng, I think it is quite precarious. The people do not have a moment to rest and recuperate. The barbarians only need to raise their sword to kill. But the people need more than 10 years to give birth and raise their children. Before the Nanman tribe was annihilated, Nansheng would probably have been wiped out." Wei Xi said, "Not necessarily." Ha! Feng Zhen was surprised. Why? Feng Zhen did not know. But Wei Xi was clear that the Nanman tribe was indeed annihilated. How could he tell the truth? He could only play the role of a charlatan. The laws of nature are constant and orderly. Every drink and every peck, every cause and every effect, everything has its own destiny. The four factions of Nanman massacred no less than 300,000 people of Nansheng. Isn't it normal for the people of Nansheng to retaliate and destroy the barbarians? Wei Xi spouted nonsense with a straight face. The corner of Feng Zhen's mouth twitched. He scolded jokingly, "I'll be damned if I believe you. You can fool others with your lies. But do you think you can fool me?" Wei Xi smiled bitterly. The four factions of Nanman were indeed annihilated. There were a total of more than 638,000 people in the four factions. Regardless of whether they were men, women, the elderly, children, or babies waiting to be fed, almost no one survived. Chapter 604. My surname is En, and my first name is Chui. Although he was dressed in the uniform of a soldier, he still greeted her with grace. He was not impolite. "I'm Lu Shi," Jiang Pingji replied, then asked, "If I'm not wrong, brother En is from the south?" And Chui recalled Jiang Pingji's conversation with Wei Xi and the others when he arrived. He had already given up trying to hide it. He said with a haggard expression, "Yes, from Nansheng." Although En Chui had never heard of Lu Shi's name when he was in Nansheng, how could he not have heard of him after escaping to the north of Dongqing? He had thought that Lu Shi would be a rather steady man from the old city, but now that he looked at him, he saw that he was actually a high-spirited youth. Even though his face was handsome, there was still a hint of androgynous immaturity about him. Looking at himself, En Chui could only sigh ruefully. En Chui and Duoshi. Chui meant sorrow. The elders had given En Chui the nickname Duoshi. It sounded tacky, but it was full of wishes. Unfortunately, En Chui's life had completely changed since the day the four factions of Nanman attacked the capital. Wei Xi sighed in his heart. It was indeed him. While Jiang Pingji and En Chui were talking, Wei Xi lowered his eyes without batting an eyelid. He secretly clenched his fists in his long sleeves, leaving behind a few white fingernail marks. Wei Xi remembered that when he had met En Chui in his last life, that person had still been a nameless nobody. In En Chui's own words, he had toiled for more than 10 years. When would it end? The old country was no more, and his temples were covered in white. He had been running around, and before he knew it, he was already more than 40 years old. If there were no accidents, he would have lived more than half of his life. But he still wanted revenge on the four factions of Nanman. En Chui and the four factions of Nanman did indeed have an unresolvable blood feud. Wei Xi sat at the side with his eyes down, listening to their conversation. He was thinking about his own matters. After his rebirth, Wei Xi had thought about his old master, but he knew that En Chui was not a wise master for him. This person's desire for revenge was too strong, especially after more than 10 years of wandering. His hatred for the four factions of Nanman had already penetrated deep into his bones. Revenge had already become his inner demon and obsession. Wei Xi still remembered the scene when Enchui gave the order to massacre the 4 factions of Nanman. As someone from the Central Plains, Wei Xi did not have a good impression of the barbarians. But this did not mean that he could sit back and watch as Enchui gave the order to massacre the entire tribe. However, one would know the outcome of Wei Xi and Enchui's dispute just by looking at the outcome. Wei Xi lost 630,000 barbarian civilians, regardless of their age or gender, were all slaughtered. Several rivers in Nanxing were clogged, and the river water was completely dyed red. Enchui did not order the soldiers to stop. Wei Xi was well aware of what they had done before the massacre, and what the barbarians had experienced. After this dispute, Wei Xi gradually drifted apart from him. What Wei Xi wanted was a wise ruler who could unify the 9 prefectures, a saint who could save the common people from disaster, not a butcher who was blinded by hatred for his country and had also committed numerous crimes. What was the difference between Enchui's final actions and the previous 4 factions of Nanman? Wei Xi acknowledged Enchui's accusation that he was soft-hearted and that it was easy for him to talk. After all, it was Enchui who had his country destroyed, his wife killed, and his children lost, not him. However, this was not an excuse for, and to retaliate with the same reason. There were other ways to punish the 4 factions of Nanman, and revenge could still be taken. Why did Enchui choose the most brutal and despicable method? Wei Xi understood Enchui's desire for revenge, but he did not approve of Enchui's actions. Enchui had only raised his troops for revenge, and his vision was only for revenge. The fate of the common people had nothing to do with him. A person who gave up everything for revenge was not the wise ruler Wei Xi was looking for. People of different principles could not work together. Therefore, Wei Xi did not pay special attention to his old master after his rebirth. Fate made a fool of him. The 2 of them had met so many years earlier. Nanxing had only been destroyed for slightly more than a year, and Enchui had only been wandering for a few months after escaping from his country. His face was still considered young, and there was a lingering sense of authority between his brows. He could barely maintain what little pride he had left, completely unlike him a decade later. At that time, although he was in his 40s, his hair and beard were all white, his face weathered, and his shoulders were hunched. He looked like a man in his 70s, but his eyes still had an unyielding sharpness. Feng Zhen noticed Wei Xi's strangeness and secretly tugged at his sleeve. "Why are you daydreaming?" Wei Xi lowered his eyes and said, "It's probably because I didn't sleep well last night and am feeling sleepy." Feng Zhen cleverly followed up on his words. "If you're not feeling well, go back to the carriage and rest." A sickly person should have the self-awareness of a sickly person. If he was not feeling well, he should go and rest. His health was his capital to cause trouble. Their voices startled Jiang Pingji and Enchui. Enchui looked in the direction of the voice, and was shocked by Wei Xi's appearance and bearing. Now that Enchui had not experienced more than a decade of wandering, Wei Xi's appearance was quite in line with his taste. Jiang Pingji also said, "If you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. We'll talk after you've rested." Wei Xi did not insist. He got up and left. Feng Zhen's eyes flashed. He bowed and bade farewell, quickly catching up to Wei Xi's footsteps. "Why did you follow me?" Wei Xi wanted to be alone for a while. The thick-skinned Feng Zhen climbed into the carriage with him. "You know this Enchui," Feng Zhen said confidently. "What's his background?" "Judging from his physiognomy, he's not an easy person to get along with." Wei Xi did not deny it. Instead he said, "Enchui is from Zhe County in the Jiang province of Nanxing country. His father, grandfather and great-grandfather have all been high-ranking officials for 3 consecutive generations. They can be considered a new aristocratic family in Nanxing country. Enchui himself is also very famous in Nanxing country. His mother was the younger sister of the Nanxing king, and he also had some relations with the Nanxing king's royal family. The day Nanxing was destroyed, Ngui's entire family." Feng Zhen did not find it strange that Wei Xi knew so much. This fellow had always been well informed. Only Enchui managed to escape? Wei Xi nodded. Yes. And Shui should be 27 or 28 years old now. He was at the peak of his life. If the southern barbarians had not invaded, he would have been the winner in life. Unfortunately, Shui's parents died tragically. His wife couldn't bear the humiliation and committed suicide, and his daughter and son died without a complete corpse. Only he was left to drag out an ignoble existence. Putting himself in Shui's shoes, Wei Xi could understand why Shui hated the southern barbarians so much. Understanding didn't mean he agreed. If Shui was just a commoner, Wei Xi would praise him for being a man if he made his enemies pay with blood. But Shui was one of the feudal lords who fought for supremacy in the world. Because of his hatred, he ignored reason and ordered the slaughter of the entire southern barbarians tribe. How could such a person be the ruler of the world? Even if he was lucky enough to become the ruler, how long could this country last? Feng Zhen said sympathetically, "He's quite pitiful. I'm afraid he would hate those barbarians to death." Wei Xi said, "Not just that. Perhaps he could have used his own abilities to fight his way back to Nansheng." Feng Zhen thought of the flame pattern on Shui's arm and seemed to understand something. Chapter 605. After all, Shui was a descendant of an aristocratic family. If it weren't for some purpose, would he be willing to infiltrate the Red Lotus group and work with the rabble? The flame tattoo on his arm meant that this person was already a small leader in the Red Lotus group. Feng Zhen couldn't help but wonder if this person wanted to climb to a high position in the Red Lotus group and then seize power and people. His suspicions weren't without reason. Wei Xi also gave him an affirmative answer. He has ambition and courage. How could he be willing to be nameless? But the heavens have treated him coldly, and he still lacks a bit of luck. Luck? Feng Zhen laughed. You're becoming more and more of a quack. Did you see this from his physiognomy? Wei Xi avoided the topic. His luck is indeed bad. Wei Xi was very familiar with the life of his former master. Sometimes luck was also a part of strength. When it came to ability and talent, Shui did not lack it. However, he lacked the right timing. Every time he racked his brains and made some progress, he would always be embroiled in the struggles around him. All his efforts would go down the drain. After running around for more than 10 years, he still had not achieved anything. He only had a few hundred veterans under him. Although he had a few fierce generals under him, they were all born in the wilderness and relied on their muscles instead of their brains to fight. The world was in chaos, and Shui jumped ship from one power to another. When he was middle-aged 40 years old, he didn't have territory or manpower. It was truly miserable. In the end, he wandered to Zhongzhou and asked Wei Xi for help. Even Wei Xi had a headache when faced with Shui's impoverished family. To be honest, Wei Xi had always paid attention to the situation in the world, but he had no intention of leaving because he felt that no one would dare use him. He was born on the 22nd day of the 8th lunar month in the year of Kuei-yu. Who would dare use him when his birth date was displayed? Even if someone did use him, they would be on guard against him, or just use him as a vase. Wei Xi wouldn't be humiliated like that. Therefore, when Shui took the initiative to ask him to leave the mountain, the sharp-eyed Wei Xi was quite surprised. But he was clear-minded and vaguely understood the ambition under Shui's old appearance. It was rumored that Wei Xi was the reincarnation of the prime minister of the previous dynasty. That prime minister had assisted the founder of the Xia dynasty from insignificance to the position of the ruler of the world. Others took the initiative to invite him out of seclusion. Did they not want to imitate the founding father of the great Xia dynasty? This person was really bold to put a traitor, who might betray his master and seize power, in an important position. Shui was determined to invite Wei Xi. Wei Xi rejected him a few times, and was even left with no choice. Shui came to visit him at the front door, but he snuck out of the back door. However, this was not a solution. Wei Xi was finally convinced by the other party, after a round of sincere conversation. He thought that this person had the ambition of the common people in the world, and had the joy of meeting a wise master. Although Shui was somewhat stubborn, hatred was also a form of motivation. Shui was no longer young at that time. Wei Xi was also afraid that he was a hero in his twilight years, and did not have the slightest desire to fight. Hatred in his heart gave him motivation. Wei Xi had painstakingly planned for Enchui, created publicity, recruited talents, managed internal government affairs, trained troops on the outside, schemed against other forces, formed alliances, or nibbled away at Enchui's territory. Wei Xi had worked slowly and steadily to help Enchui, going from having no territory to occupying half of Nanqing's territory. Jiang Pingji exploited her employees and did not pay them their wages. After the incident, she knew to use the title deed of a mansion worth 1 copper coin to appease them and create various benefits. Disregarding everything else, Yang Xi was still able to fatten up in the winter, even when he was busy with government affairs. It was evident how good his meals and treatment were. However, when Wei Xi helped Enchui, he was really helping him. He did not see a single salary for several years in a row, but he was willing to endure it. He was realizing his ideals. His body was poor, but his heart was not. However, he never expected Enchui's obsession with revenge to be so deep in his bones. He was so crazy that it surprised him. There was nothing wrong with avenging the country and repaying a debt of blood with blood. However, Wei Xi hoped to integrate the 4 factions of Nanman. It could not be seen in 1 or 2 generations, but after 3 or 4 generations, they would forget their ancestors, civilization, language, and customs, and completely integrate into the Central Plains. The people of the 4 factions of Nanman were also people. Only with a large population would the country be strong. At that time, the competition for supremacy in the world would be extremely intense. More than 10 feudal vassals would divide up the territory of the original 5 countries, and they would still be at war with each other. Wei Xi wanted to take advantage of the time when they were fighting fiercely to stabilize the rear, recuperate, and develop himself silently. He felt that he would not be able to see the world being unified in his lifetime, so he wanted to lay a good foundation for his descendants to realize. In the end, Enchui used military force and waged war against the 4 factions of Nanman for years. He was determined to destroy Nanman, and countless people and soldiers died or were injured. In the end, he did destroy the 4 factions of Nanman. Whether they were innocent or not, Nanman still became history. But how many people and soldiers died in the process? Not only did so many people die, but Wei Xi's years of hard work was also wasted. Honestly speaking, if Enchui had not fought against the South several times and wasted too much military, material and manpower, Jiang Pingji would not have been able to annex Enchui's power so quickly. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji did not have the habit of killing prisoners of war or massacring cities. Otherwise, more people would have died indirectly because of Enchui. To put it bluntly, if Enchui could become the victor, he would slaughter his clan for revenge and destroy the barbarians. The history books of later generations would praise him as a mighty lord. In the end, he wanted revenge, but still dragged his own people and people to hell. Such a person was not a mighty lord, but a tyrant. Even though many years had passed, Wei Xi was still angry when he thought of that history. Feng Jin thought far ahead. He asked Wei Xi, if this person wanted to stab the Red Lotus group in the back, wouldn't that suit my lord's intentions? Wei Xi was silent for a moment, then asked, aren't you afraid of nurturing a tiger and causing trouble? Feng Jin really liked to court death. Helping Enchui to deal with the Red Lotus group was a great idea. This fellow even laughed and said, how can Enchui be considered a tiger? If we use him well, we can use the opportunity to let him restrain the forces in Nanxing. There were no eternal enemies in the world. There were only friends with similar interests and enemies with opposing interests. Wei Xi sighed. Enchui was indeed a tiger, and a big one at that. Once he met the right person, he could soar to the skies. Don't let your guard down. A dam of 1,000 miles can be destroyed by an ant's nest, let alone a living person. Feng Jin said indifferently, you're just too cautious. Enchui is just a stray dog now. Moreover, we don't know if this Enchui can be supported by a wall. Observe him in secret. If it's feasible, we can manipulate him. Wei Xi's expression changed when he heard that. After a while, Wei Xi sighed and said, indeed, I'm thinking too much. He clearly didn't want to be affected by the memories of his past life, But when he considered things, he couldn't help but be dragged into the ditch. The situation now was different from his past life. In his past life, Enchanting was powerful and prosperous. His lord Jiangpingji was the object of ridicule, a woman vainly trying to get her hands on the 9 tripod cauldrons. How laughable was that? He was so poor that the people under him had more muscles than brains. Although he was capable in war, he was weak in internal affairs. Without a stable rear, how could he expand outward? However, within a few years, Enchanting, along with a small part of Nansheng, had been swallowed up by this person. Times had changed. Now Jiangpingji was strong, and Enchanting was alone. Chapter 606. What does the Lord think of Enchanting? Wei Xi asked Jiangpingji in private. He wanted to hear her evaluation of Enchanting, so that he could carry out the next step of the plan. Jiangpingji looked at the burning bonfire. She rested her elbows on her knees, and rested her cheeks on her palms. And, what special opinion can I have of him? If I have to say, this person is very vengeful. I don't like him very much. Jiangpingji clicked her tongue and said, he's not on the same path as us. He's ambitious. Are you trying to rope him in? Wei Xi almost choked on her speculation. He hurriedly said, no, I just want to hear the Lord's evaluation of this person. Jiangpingji snorted with the tip of her nose. I didn't expect Zixiao to be so curious. As for Andy, I don't like him very much. He doesn't reflect on himself, and doesn't learn from his mistakes. If he is unlucky, he will be like this for the rest of his life. Wei Xi was surprised. My lord said that. Enchanting did not reflect on his mistakes, and did not think about his lessons? She said, just now, I got a rough understanding of this person's background from him. Speaking of which, he could be considered half a member of the royal family. Ever since their grandfather's generation, the Yin family had risen to glory, enjoying all the riches and honor in the world. Enchanting was even a young master who lived a lavish life. For the first half of his life he lived in a honeypot. The 4 factions of Nanman invaded and plundered, destroyed his home and family, and seized his country. He had reason to be angry and take revenge. Wei Xi listened attentively. He knew very well that his lord's way of thinking was very different from ordinary people. She could always come up with fresh ideas. As expected, Jiangpingji changed the topic. She said, but Zixiao, I don't think there's anything wrong with the 4 factions of Nanman attacking Nansheng. Wei Xi's expression stiffened. He did not expect his lord to say this. Jiangpingji raised her hand to stop him. She said in detail, Enchanting intended to take revenge on the 4 factions of Nanman, because of the hatred between his country and his family. Can't the 4 factions of Nanman take revenge on Nansheng for the sake of their homeland and family? Think carefully about what the 4 factions of Nanman have done all along the way to invade. Rape and pillage, brutally killing women and children, beheading men who are taller than the shaft of a carriage, not having enough military rations, using human flesh as food. All kinds of crimes are too numerous to list. They were berserkers through and through, brutal and brutal. But, does Zixiao know what Nansheng did to the 4 factions of Nanman? Wei Xi was well read. The books he had read in his previous and current lives were as vast as the sea. When she asked this question, Wei Xi seemed to have thought of something. Jiangpingji sneered and said, look at your expression. Zixiao, you know. During the period of the Great Xia dynasty, the 4 tribes of Nanman submitted to the Great Xia dynasty. They paid tribute every year and called themselves subjects. The Central Plains and the barbarians lived in harmony. The last emperor of the Great Xia dynasty was muddle-headed and incompetent, and all the feudal lords in the world had thoughts of rebelling. When Nansheng country was first established, the country was not stable. Many of the southern barbarians were captured to be slaves and soldiers. More than 200,000 people died of exhaustion in battle. Nansheng's capital city was built. Inside the city was a luxurious city, and outside the city were piles of bones. Other than a small number of prisoners of war and slaves, the rest were the strong men of the southern barbarians who had been captured. No matter how Nansheng tried to whitewash this history, a fair historian would not give in so easily. Furthermore, after Nansheng was founded, the four factions of Nanman claimed to be the suzerain of the country. They used their powerful armies to force the other party to pay tribute year after year. Every year, the tribute was heavier than the last, and the grain tax was so heavy that it was unbearable. The southern barbarians rebelled a few times, but were defeated. Nanxing suppressed them a few times and slaughtered no less than 100,000 people. The four factions of Nanman were indeed uncivilized barbarians. But were Nanxing not beasts in human clothing? Oh right, in the early days of Nanxing's founding, human trafficking was very serious. It was roughly divided into three categories: prisoners of war, slaves, and barbarians. Among them, the barbarians had the best physical strength and were the cheapest. Among them, the number of barbarians was the largest. How did they come? They used their armies to seize people and force them to buy and sell. The pockets of many aristocrats in Nanxing country were filled with the blood and tears of the barbarians for generations. And Chui dared to say that every penny he used since he was young came from a clean background? She said mockingly. From what I see, the people of the Central Plains and the barbarians are all people. Everyone has a despicable side. During the glorious period, Nanxing claimed to be the legitimate ruler of the Great Xia dynasty. But what did they do that they dared to publicize? How much of the land of the four tribes of Nanman was occupied by Nanxing under the pretext of violence, conspiracy and overt plots, robbery and murder? Nanxing's crimes were also too numerous to list. If Nanman were beasts, Nanxing wouldn't be able to be open and aboveboard. The difference between the two is that Nanman wrote savagery and cruelty on their faces, while Nanxing wore a layer of pretentiousness. After saying this, Jiang Pingji softened her tone. She said, "Do you know why I don't like Chui? It's not that I think it's wrong for him to take revenge. In fact, I also like to take revenge with hatred and revenge with hatred. Hatred for one's country makes one want to eat the enemy's flesh and blood. But Chui is a noble, not a commoner. The more rights he enjoys, the more responsibilities he should bear. His hatred comes from Nanman destroying his family, country, and status, causing him to fall from a favored son of heaven to a stray dog. It's not for the people who are still in the enemy's hands. At a time like this, he still wants to use the people's flesh and blood to take revenge? Shouldn't he think of ways to protect the people, stabilize the situation, and then chase the four factions of Nanman out? To put it bluntly, Chui was too selfish. Jiang Pingji didn't like him. Everyone had selfishness, and she had it too. She understood Chui's feelings, but she couldn't agree with him. When Wei Xi heard this, he was stunned on the spot for a while. Jiang Pingji thought that Wei Xi had suffered a huge blow, so she added, "Now the people of Nanxing are meat on the chopping block. We can't let the people of today wait helplessly to be trampled on by Nanman, just because of the hatred from a few generations ago. I just feel that Chui hasn't reflected on the grudge between Nanman and Nanxing. According to his character, if he really succeeds in taking revenge, the four factions of Nanman won't be far from being annihilated." It was impossible to completely annihilate the tribe. There would always be fish that slipped through the net and escaped. Life was full of ups and downs. Who knew if the descendants of the fish that slipped through the net would stir up an even bigger wave? Wei Xi said, "My lord's way of thinking is different, and it has enlightened me." Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes and asked bluntly, "Zixiao, what's your motive for suddenly asking me about Chui?" Wei Xi was originally hesitant about whether he should let the tiger return to the mountains, but now he was calm. "Previously, Zishur and I talked about something, and I think it's feasible," Wei Xi said. "Chui wants to borrow the troops of the Red Lotus Group, and my lord wants to take back Qingda County, which the Red Lotus Group is entrenched in. Why don't we have a win-win situation? We can let him coordinate with us, and the two of us can work together." There were Shangyang County, Fengyi County, and Qingda County in Wanzhou. Shangyang County was in the bag, and Fengyi County was thriving. If they could have the help of an insider, the difficulty of taking down Qingda County would be greatly reduced. Jiang Pingji was a little tempted by his words. "But the Red Lotus Group has a lot of manpower. Are you letting me take advantage of Chui? After the Red Lotus Group was defeated, the people that were captured would all be hers. Why should she let Shui, who was alone, take advantage of them? Chapter 607. After hearing Wei Xi's opinion, Jiang Pingji looked as if she had discovered a new continent. She said, I thought Zixiao was the most virtuous. I didn't expect him to have such a sinister side. That was true. Which strategist didn't end up black after being split open? You're right. The Red Lotus group is different from the Tsingyi army. The former bewitches the ignorant people with groundless doctrines. Their thoughts are stubborn and hard to eradicate. If they spread such a cult in private and affect the people under their rule, it won't be good. It's not bad to throw it out and make use of it. Wei Xi sighed. He knew that she was teasing and joking. If she said it to someone unfamiliar, they would think she was being sarcastic. As long as my lord doesn't mind, Wei Xi said. Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and fiddled with the bonfire, making it burn brighter. Yes, I don't mind. I quite like it. It was a perfectly normal conversation, but Wei Xi had the urge to warm up. Not far away, Feng Zhen inexplicably felt like he had been stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. TSK. Looks like I don't have to be nosy. Feng Zhen shrugged his shoulders. As a sickly man who had taken too much hanchi powder, he really hated winter and summer. He climbed back into the carriage and blocked it tightly. Only then did he feel at ease and warm himself with the hot water. After a night of wind and snow, the soldiers had already boiled water, soaked dried meat, and cooked millet porridge to tide them over for the morning. Jiang Pingji asked the soldiers to inform Shui to come over for breakfast. The conditions are simple. Brother, and make do with it. If there's a chance in the future, I'll treat you. Jiang Pingji spoke boldly and politely. Shui was not someone who didn't know what was good for him, so he hurriedly made small talk and agreed. Dried meat, broth, and porridge. The food was indeed simple, but considering the current conditions, it was considered extremely generous. To add flavor, some spices were added to the broth. It smelled very fragrant. The streaming room opened at a fixed time. The audience, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed in. Some said hello and some said hello, because the streaming room's upper limit was set at 150,000 people. Plus its reputation was known by everyone. It made every seat very difficult to get. Whoever managed to get a seat would definitely show it off on Weibo or WeChat moments. As soon as the audience came in, their sharp eyes noticed that in addition to the streamer, Beauty Ci, and Feng Zhen, there was also a stranger. Duanwuji eating zongzi. Who was this person? How could he be qualified to have breakfast with the host? Children's day snacks. I don't know. I don't think he's appeared before. Do any ancient gods know who this guy is? Fried mushroom. I don't know him either. He probably appeared after the live stream closed last night. Wait a minute. Yesterday it was mentioned that the soldiers found a guy who had fainted on the side of the road and was almost covered in snow. The host sent people to save him. Maybe it was him. Yongyong 18-year-old. Maybe. If he's really the person who was saved yesterday, he must have some background or ability. The livestream screen was filled with discussions about Shui. The more serious viewers only discussed Shui's identity and background, hoping to find some clues. The less serious viewers stared at Shui's appearance and figure, commenting on him from head to toe. Host V. His name is Shui. He was indeed saved by the soldiers yesterday. Jiang Pingji sent a bullet screen and continued to have her breakfast with a calm expression. After eating, she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she asked Shui with concern. The world is so chaotic now. What plans do you have, brethren? Shui had been hungry for a long time, but he still maintained his modesty and habits. He only ate until he was 80% full for breakfast. Hearing Jiang Pingji's question, Shui's expression was a little confused. He immediately became determined and said in a sonorous voice, "The beasts of Nanman trampled the mountains and rivers of my country and enslaved the people of Nansheng. As a man, I should shed my blood and seek revenge from the barbarians." Yes, he wanted revenge. Even when he had collapsed in the snow and lost consciousness, the last thought in his mind was revenge. If the beasts of the four factions of Nanman hadn't trampled on Nansheng, destroyed his family, slaughtered his family, destroyed his country, and trampled on his dignity and pride. How could he have fallen from a high and mighty noble gentleman with a bright future to a stray dog today? His country had fallen, and he couldn't return to his home. Thinking of those days when he was homeless, even Enchui's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Jiang Pingji said, "Revenge? The 4 factions of Nanman have strong military power. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for Brother N to fulfill your wish." If the 4 factions of Nanman were so easy to defeat, Nanxing wouldn't have been destroyed. Enchui's face was as white as paper. His gaze drifted to his arm and he sighed. "I know it's difficult, but if I don't try, how can I be satisfied? I wanted to borrow your country's troops to suppress us, but I didn't expect Dongqing to be in such troubled times." A few years ago, the 4 factions of Nanman had almost breached the capital city of Nanxing. The other 4 countries of the Central Plains had sent troops to support them. However, the 4 factions of Nanman were sinister and cunning. When faced with the reinforcements of the 4 countries, they chose to fight and retreat. At first, the aristocrats of Nanxing thought that the 4 factions of Nanman were afraid of the reinforcements. Later they realized that they were smart. They fought and retreated, not fighting head-on with the reinforcements. They preserved their troops to the greatest extent. The other 4 countries weren't kind people. They had to be paid for coming from afar to help fight, and the pay wasn't low. The 4 factions of Nanman didn't lose much of their military power. They had the power to stage a comeback at any time. Nanxing could only grit its teeth and swallow its anger. It gave the reinforcements of the other 4 countries generous rewards, such as land, money, rations, military equipment, and even population. After the reinforcements retreated, the 4 factions of Nanman attacked again. Some aristocrats and relatives of the royal family in the country betrayed information and military intelligence for their own interests. This made the destruction of Nanxing a foregone conclusion. Enchui had wanted to borrow troops from Dongqing, but he didn't expect Dongqing to be in a difficult situation. Jiang Pingji pretended to suggest to him, "Why don't you try going to Zhongzhou?" Enchui laughed bitterly. He had escaped to Dongqing by a narrow escape and faced the threat of death several times. Now that he had to go to Zhongzhou, he didn't know if he would survive. To tell you the truth, I tried my best to sneak into the Red Lotus group with my own intentions. Enchui heaved a long sigh of relief. There was a look of determination between his brows. The Red Lotus group bewitches the people with their teachings. Now they have gathered tens of thousands of members, not only in the north of Dongqing, but they also go to other places to spread their teachings and trick the people into joining. They seem similar to Buddhism and Taoism, but in reality, they are no different from a cult. Jiang Pingji raised her brows discreetly. She had just been thinking about how to cooperate with Enchui, but he had come up to her himself. He said all this to pave the way for his next goal. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to reveal a worried expression. She said, "The Red Lotus group is indeed a malignant tumor. If we allow them to take root in the north of Dongqing and spread their teachings, in another 2 or 3 years, the people in the north will be bewitched into joining the cult by the Red Lotus group." Chapter 608. Both of them clearly had the intention to cooperate, but they still tried to trick each other. The viewers in the streaming room were dumbfounded. They thought Enchui would become Jiang Pingji's strategist. They were already prepared to laugh. Some of them brought over a bench to eat melon seeds. They sat and watched how the streamer tricked someone into coming over, and then threw heavy administrative tasks to Enchui. Casserole mutton chop with noodles. Haha, I love watching the streamer trick people. Thinking about how Feng Zhen used to have a cheap mouth, the streamer forced him to quit eating hanshi powder in order to exploit him. I went to find out what withdrawal symptoms were, and then my heart ached for him. Charcoal roasted enoki mushroom. Tisk tsk. How many workers have been tricked by the streamer? Just look at Feng Zhen. He's very unrestrained, but that's in the past. Now he has to tremble with fear when he drinks every day, afraid that a pair of eyes is staring at him from a corner. How pitiful. Sprite and cola. I'm betting on a cucumber. Guess how many rounds the streamer will need to take down Enchui? Ippon tofu. I'm not betting. I'm on the streamer's side anyway. Today's dinner, I'm on the streamer's side too. She'll definitely take him down within 30 rounds. A group of salted fish in the pool, who only knew how to cheer for the streamer, discussed noisily. However, as the two conversed, the onlookers felt that something was wrong. Why? Did it not feel like she was taking in a follower? Was it their imagination? Jiang Pingji sighed worriedly. I only have 20,000 troops. Although the Red Lotus group is a motley crew, they claim to have 100,000 members. It's not easy to deal with them. I also want to remove this tumor, but I'm alone. I'm afraid I can't do it alone. And Shui took advantage of the situation and volunteered himself. If you don't mind, why don't I be your pawn and open the way for you? The two had only known each other for a short period of time, but they were already calling each other brother and brother-in, as if they were very close. Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. She looked somewhat puzzled. Brother-in, what do you mean? And Shui said, we can work together from within and without. Although I don't have much ability, I have some confidence in the Red Lotus group that can be of great use. Brother, you only have 20,000 troops, but each of them is good at fighting and can fight 10 of them alone. With the help of our spies, the Red Lotus group will not be destroyed. Jiang Pingji revealed a slightly tempted expression, but she wanted to say something but stopped herself. She deliberately kept in Shui's heart in suspense. After a while, she finished deliberating and said hesitantly, if that's the case, I'll feel very sorry. Coordinating from the inside would certainly be extremely dangerous. If Brother-in were to be careless and be discovered by the traitors of the Red Lotus group, wouldn't that be harming Brother-in? No, I can't take the risk. And almost couldn't catch her breath. That wasn't how the script was written. He said everything has a risk. How can one give up eating for fear of choking? Jiang Pingji looked hesitant. Her gaze kept drifting in the direction of Wei Xi and Feng Zhen, as if she couldn't make up her mind. Feng Zhen raised his eyebrows and deliberately chose not to respond, but Wei Xi had no choice but to cooperate. My lord, I think this is feasible. In order to cooperate with Jiang Pingji's performance, Wei Xi had no choice but to put on a confident and slightly arrogant attitude. Although the Red Lotus group has a large number of members and claims to have 100,000 members, they are undisciplined and undisciplined. In addition, the Red Lotus group secretly exploits the people and defrauds them of their wealth with their teachings. There are countless victims and complaints. If we can join forces with Mr. N, my lord will attack from the outside and brother, and will coordinate from the inside to deal with the people who are dissatisfied with the Red Lotus group. Will we have to worry about not being able to take down Qingde County? The Red Lotus group's operations were focused on Qingde County. With Qingde County as the center, they expanded to other places, deceiving countless people along the way. If Qingde County fell, it was equivalent to uprooting the foundation of the Red Lotus group. The other scattered strongholds could be slowly cleaned up. Jiang Pingji nodded in agreement. Zixiao is right, but the original plan was to send troops in spring. It's still the middle of winter now, she agreed, and felt that his opportunity had come. He cupped his hands in front of his chest and said, Brother, don't be anxious. This matter is of great importance, and should indeed be planned slowly. Brother, you have long had the intention to uproot the evil group and benefit the people. This is a great deed. There are still a few months before spring. I can also take advantage of this time to properly deploy and try to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Jiang Pingji continued to act as a silly, sweet, and passionate lord without much experience in the martial world. How could she take advantage of him? In that case, I will first thank you on behalf of the people. Brother-in is benevolent and righteous. If we can completely uproot the Red Lotus group and save the people in the north who are suffering and being bewitched, this move will surely be remembered for generations to come. Jiang Pingji seemed very excited. She couldn't wait to do something big right now. She said, if it succeeds, Brother-in will have contributed a lot. How can Lanting claim all the credit? And Shui had been waiting for Jiang Pingji to say this. He said self-deprecatingly, I'm just a stray dog. I'm already satisfied to be able to do what I can to benefit the people. I don't ask for anything more, Jiang Pingji said enthusiastically. Brother-in, why do you have to belittle yourself? So what if you don't have troops? With your ability, you will have them in the future. How about this? If we conquer Fingy County, Brotherin will get 10% of the money and manpower we obtain. And Shui's heart beat uncontrollably. 10%. He had indeed thought of coaxing some benefits, but he had never thought that this silly and bold person would be so generous. She would ask for 10% of the money and manpower. The Red Lotus Group's ill-gotten gains were far more than 10 million. Even if it was only 10%, it would still be a huge figure. With money and the 10% of manpower that he would get, and Shui would be able to slowly build up his power. Perhaps he could even go further. And Shui had been lurking in the Red Lotus Group for several months. He had carefully managed to build up some manpower, but there were only a few hundred of them. If he could help Jiang Pengji conquer Chengde County, his manpower and wealth would increase by dozens of times. He was already tempted, but he still had to be humble on the surface. I'm just providing support. I don't have any great merits. How can it compare to you leading troops to exterminate the evil sect? No, this gift is too heavy. I'm ashamed to accept it. Jiang Pengji was so enthusiastic. She was a proper foolish son of a landlord. How could she take back the profits she had promised? The two of them pushed back and forth for a few rounds, under Jiang Pengji's coercion, and Shui reluctantly accepted the heavy thanks. With a common cooperation, the atmosphere was naturally harmonious. They addressed each other as brother-in and younger brother. They were like a pair of iron brothers. Feng Zhen was the first to lose it. He got goosebumps all over his body and found an excuse to sneak away. He even pulled Wei Xi away at the same time. The two of them whispered to each other. My lord is too generous. 10% of the wealth and manpower. She's like a foolish son of a landlord. Feng Zhen was as talkative as ever. Wei Xi laughed. My lord's focus is on the northern part of Dongqing. She can't take care of other forces. It's not bad if she can make Enchui a target. Besides, Enchui's enemies are the four factions of Nanman. The latter even destroyed Nansheng. Why would they be afraid of Enchui? Even in his previous life, Enchui had to squander years of Wei Xi's painstaking efforts. Coupled with the locust plague in the Nansheng tribe, he was lucky to win. The four factions of Nanman were still at their peak. If Enchui wanted revenge, it would be like throwing an egg against a rock. Wei Xi continued. You don't know how big of a hidden danger the diehard members of the Red Lotus Group are. None of them can be left alive. Even without Enchui, Wei Xi wanted to privately suggest to Jiang Pengji to slaughter all the higher-ups of the Red Lotus Group. Chapter 609. Feng Zhen laughed and said, Since it's a hidden danger, we naturally have to eliminate it as soon as possible. Are you sure it's foolproof that you're pushing these malignant tumors to Enchui? If Enchui put these high-ranking members of the Red Lotus Group in an important position, and Enchui came over to challenge them instead, what would happen then? Wei Xi shook his head. He said very confidently, Those people from the Red Lotus Group have already tasted what it's like to be in a high position. How can they easily submit to others? Not to mention that Enchui was originally just an insignificant member of the Red Lotus sect. The upper echelons of the Red Lotus Group would temporarily endure for the sake of their lives, but they would not be able to do so for long. As for Enchui, he's very smart. Once something threatens his existence, no matter what, Enchui was from an aristocratic family. No matter how low his emotional intelligence was, his intelligence was still there. If the people from the Red Lotus Group had the ability to outplay Enchui would not have been able to rise to the position of a minor leader in just a few short months. So just wait and see. This was destined to be a situation where both sides would make use of each other. It was just a matter of who was superior. Once Enchui felt that he no longer needed these people, it would be their time to die. Feng Zhen went around in circles for a long time before he vaguely understood Wei Xi's plan. Are you planning to use Enchui to kill those people from the Red Lotus Group? Wasn't it just killing a person? Was there a need to go around in such a big circle? The answer was that it was necessary, very necessary. My lord should not be tainted with the bad reputation of killing prisoners of war. But the stubborn cancer of the Red Lotus Group cannot be left alive. Enchui was an accident. Without him, See, I could only be the bad guy for once. Since we have him, why not make use of him? Feng Zhen was speechless. What had the Red Lotus group done to provoke Wei Ci that he was so concerned about them? In fact, Wei Ci would take note of every person who made him unhappy. It didn't matter whether he could get back at them or not. What was important was that he had to remember this matter. However, the Red Lotus group did not provoke Wei Ci. Instead, they provoked Jiang Pingji. Wei Ci still remembered that in his previous life, when the world had just been stabilized, His Majesty had sacrificed the Jiuzhou divine cauldron, ascended the throne with the sacred mountain, and established the country as Jiang. The Jiuzhou and the Four Seas were in urgent need of reorganization, but the aftermath of more than 10 years of war was not something that could be resolved in 1 or 2 days. In addition, the weather was not good. Occasionally, there would be a food shortage. The people were anxious and uneasy, and there were rumors that the Empress was a demon. At this moment, the Red Lotus group, which was left with only a wisp of flame, seized the opportunity to stage a comeback. Although it did not shake the foundation of the country, it added a few feet of official documents to Jiang Pengji's desk. The common people were unwilling to believe her. Instead, they chose to believe the remnants of the Red Lotus group, who were spreading lies to deceive the masses, and led troops in rebellion. One could imagine how she felt. Hence, Wei Ci was in a bad mood. If he was in a bad mood, how could the Red Lotus group have a good life? Feng Zhen clicked his tongue and teased. You're really shameless. You deceive the world with your looks. You're clearly a hypocrite. Although she did not know how the Red Lotus group had offended Wei Ci did not hide his malice towards the Red Lotus group at all. Wei Ci said, looks are given to us by our parents. It's an innate advantage. What's wrong with using it occasionally? He had never claimed that he was a gentleman. If he really wanted to blame someone, then he could only blame his parents for giving him a face that was too beautiful and elegant and harmless. Oh, some people couldn't even be jealous. On the other hand, Jiang Pingji and Enchanting had already reached a preliminary consensus on their cooperation. Before the beginning of spring, Jiang Pingji would send people to take pity on Enchanting at regular intervals. Thinking of Enchanting's previous predicament of almost freezing to death by the roadside, Jiang Pingji ordered people to prepare food and inconspicuous belongings for him. The food shortage in the north and other places was getting worse by the day. The spring plowing and autumn harvest for the past 2 years had also been put on hold because of the war. The common people had also left their homes, and the fields were barren and uncultivated. Naturally, the production of food would be greatly reduced. Enchanting had become a small leader in the Red Lotus group. Logically speaking, he should not be that poor, but he still needed to use his income to recruit confidence. He could only live frugally and save as much as he could. Brethren, please don't decline. This is all out of my good intentions. You must accept it. Jiang Pingji could not wait for Enchanting to settle down quickly, so that he could contribute to the war after the beginning of spring. Some food and a few hundred taels of silver were nothing at all. They were insignificant to her. But for the destitute Enchanting, it was a timely help. Enchanting declined for a while, but in the end, he accepted it with a shameful expression. He kept saying that he would repay her double in the future. Jiang Pingji said, you and I share the same interests like old friends. If we talk about such tacky things, wouldn't it ruin our friendship? Enchanting smiled on the surface, but he was laughing in his heart. He was a young master of a wealthy family who did not know the sufferings of the world, the foolish son of a landlord. It seemed that Lu Shi had contributed a large part to Lu Shi's conquest of Fengyi County and the development of the county so well. After all, according to the persona that Jiang Pingji had revealed so far, she indeed did not have such great capabilities. Unknowingly, Enchanting's heart had become less vigilant, and he had become more contemptuous and casual. He had thought that Lu Shi had cultivated to a high level at such a young age. Now that he had seen it, it seemed that there was an expert guiding her from behind the scenes. That was why she had the glory she had today. The audience in the streaming room did not understand. Jin Tian Yigang. Streamer, this is not like you at all. You don't get any benefits, yet you spend money first. Mingtian Buzhao. To the person above, that's not right. For example, when you go fishing, don't you put bait on the hook before fishing? The streamer obviously wants to make use of Enchanting to stir up trouble. Compared to her current overdraft, the future profits are too tempting. Too sleepy. But what if Enchanting escapes with the rations and money? Duan Wuan Kong. First of all, Enchanting is a member of the aristocracy of Nansheng. The streamer has already confirmed this. Since he is a member of the aristocracy, do you think Enchanting has never seen such a small amount of money? What he desires is the 10% of the people and money that the streamer has promised him. With money and people, he can slowly develop his power and take revenge for his country. That is the real big fish. How can a person with ambition and brains give up such a big harvest for a little bit of bait? The streamer will definitely profit in this game. Everybody sleeps early. No, to be precise, it should be a win-win situation. Enchanting does not lose out either. He has neither the people nor the rations now. He only needs to coordinate with the streamer. Without sending a single soldier, he can get 10% of the profits. Even loan sharks do not have such huge profits. This situation seems to be a win-win situation, but no one knows what the real future holds. After bidding farewell to Enchanting, Jiang Pingji's convoy continued on its way. The heavy snow had stopped, but the snow was deep, making it difficult for horses and carriages to travel. The journey that was originally expected to take 7 to 8 days had taken more than half a month. Feng Jin had long received news that Jiang Pingji would come personally, but he waited and waited, but she did not come. This made him extremely anxious. Report, there is an envoy from Fengyi County outside the city. Chapter 610. When the servant reported, Feng Gui was playing chess with his father Feng Ren. When he heard the news, he couldn't help but raise his head to look at Feng Ren. I didn't expect Lu Shi to really come. How brave. Feng Ren smiled as he placed his chess piece. Both he and Feng Gui were people who liked to take things slowly. As the number of confrontations increased, the situation on the chessboard became more and more complicated, making it difficult to predict. He's braver than Lu Shi. Feng Gui was still rather curious about Feng Jin's lord. If I remember correctly, you've met Lu Shi before? What kind of person is he? During the assessment in Shangjing, Lu Shi and his son had stayed in Feng Ren's house. Feng Ren had told Feng Gui about this. Feng Ren said, he's a rather spirited young man. He's much more upright than his father. However, Feng Ren had never expected Lu Shi to have such ambitions. However, he could understand that Lu Shi and the Dongqing royal family were at odds. There was an irreconcilable conflict between the two. I'm afraid this alone won't be enough to convince Huayu. I really want to meet him sooner. Feng Gui's lips curled into a gentle smile. Although he had changed from a married man to a divorced man with 2 children, without Madame Feng Du's hysteria and pestering, he seemed to have lost his burden. He felt more relaxed and his breathing became calmer. Although he really wanted to meet the legendary Jiang Pingji, Feng Gui's identity prevented him from going out of the city to welcome her. After all, Madame Feng wasn't Jiang Pingji's subjects. They should be equal in terms of status, and not superior and subordinate. Feng Ren said, what's the hurry? We'll meet eventually. I hope he doesn't disappoint. Feng Ren had a good impression of Jiang Pingji. This good impression wasn't because of her identity as Lu Shi's son. On the contrary, the identity of Lu Shi's son was a minus for Feng Ren. If Lu Shi was as two-faced as Lu Shi, he wouldn't be at ease. Feng Ren felt that Jiang Pingji was good only because when Feng Jin was accidentally injured by the 3 tribes of the northern borderline at Jishan's hot spring, only Jiang Pingji stepped forward. It was better to have such a loyal and friendly lord than to be unfaithful and heartless. However, Feng Ren felt that Jiang Pingji was a loyal and righteous person, but Feng Jin felt that his lord was a heartless man. He hurriedly went out of the city to welcome them. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. His lord immediately greeted him. Huayu, are you going back before or after the new year? Jiang Pingji got off the horse and held the reins in her hand. Feng Jin had just finished bowing to her, and she had already poked his sore spot. Feng Jin was at a loss and did not know what was going on. When he saw Jiang Pingji's half-smiling face, his heart thumped. Wait a minute, she said. The documents in the government office are almost touching the roof beams. Xiaoyu and the others are helping you, but you still have to return them when you go back. Feng Jin's smile froze. He leaned closer to Jiang Pingji and suppressed his complicated feelings. He gritted his teeth and asked her in a low voice, "My lord, I've done you a great service by returning home this time. Let's not talk about contributions, but hard work. In the end, is this how you reward people?" Usually, Feng Jin rarely used formal words like you, but now he deliberately emphasized the pronunciation. Jiang Pingji was unperturbed. She tucked her hands into her sleeves and her eyes were smiling. "That's a different matter," she said calmly. "Huayu has done a great service, so naturally, you should be rewarded handsomely. But it's also true that you deliberately slacked off and delayed your return in Shangyang County. As a lord, you must be clear about rewards and punishments. You can't slack off. Only when there are rewards and punishments can people be convinced." Feng Jin's expression was like a pallet that had been overturned. He relied on his strong willpower not to kill his lord. Wei Xiai had an expression that said, "I didn't see anything." On the other hand, Feng Jun was mercilessly watching the show with a smile. Only the audience in the streaming room had some conscience and knew to feel sorry for Feng Jin. Duangwu Jiangkang. "Ha ha ha, streamer, doesn't your conscience hurt? I just saw baby Feng Jin riding his horse out of the city with a face full of joy. It looks like he didn't even have time to tidy up his appearance. He was so happy, but you poured a bucket of cold water on him the moment you saw him. Happy Children's Day. It's not just a bucket of cold water, it's 1,000 years of ice. My heart feels cold." Mingtian Yufenwei. Before seeing the streamer, baby Feng Jin's mood must have been, "I really want to see my lord. I'm begging for praise, appreciation and kisses." After seeing the streamer, his mood is like King a dog. "What lousy lord, I want to jump ship." Feng Jin Baobao aggrieved. Baby Feng Jin's mood is very bad. He doesn't want to say anything, and threw a dog to the streamer. Zhugong Baobao watching a show. The streamer has no integrity, and caught the dog thrown by baby Feng Jin. She even happily ket it. Looking at the streaming room that had lost its integrity, Jiang Pingji felt that she should drag the system out and give it a beating. The system had set so many permissions for the streaming room backstage. Why didn't it restrict the level of the bullet screen as well? Look at the 2 bullet screens that flew past just now. Was that something a child could see? Fortunately, Feng Jin understood his lord and best friend well enough. He felt depressed for a while, and then let go of it. Wasn't it just being caught skipping work for a few days? He didn't believe that there would be many official documents accumulated over the past few days. Because they had already informed the guards at the city gates beforehand, they let them through. Feng Jin welcomed Jiang Pingji into the city. "My lord, did you really agree to that condition?" Feng Jin asked her in a low voice. He was rather worried. He understood Jiang Pingji's temperament. Those who had boarded the pirate ship could forget about getting off. How could she easily agree to the Feng family's condition? She replied, "Why wouldn't I agree? This is a win-win deal. We can take over Shangyang County without losing a single soldier. How great is that? As for the Feng family, Shangyang County would be hers. The Feng family would also be hers in the future. No matter who the Feng family had bet their treasures on, that person would be defeated by her. Moreover, this world will be mine in the future. What's more, it's the Feng family." For her, it was just something that belonged to her passing through someone else's hands, and then returning to her. There was no loss. According to the usual script, Feng Jin should be subdued by Jiang Pingji's domineering spirit, but he only felt that his lord's illness was acting up again. She was a Chinibyu. Feng Jin also wanted Jiang Pingji to win in the end, but the world was unpredictable. Who could guarantee what would happen in the future? If that's the case, I'll wait and see. Jiang Pingji poured cold water on him coldly. We'll talk about it when you're alive to finish the accumulated government affairs. Let's see if you dare to skip work in the future. Feng Jin was speechless. He felt that if Jiang Pingji lost in the future, it would definitely be because of her mouth. Why was she so annoying? Feng Jin asked someone to settle the guards and the carriage. Then, he led Jiang Pingji, and her group into the Feng residence. Feng Ren had been waiting for a long time. Chapter 611. Jiang Pingji had seen Feng Ren before. A few years had passed, but the retired Feng Ren looked younger and more spirited than before. Because Feng Jin had already discussed the matter beforehand, they were almost done. All that was left was for Jiang Pingji to agree, and the ownership of Shenyang County would be transferred. It could be said that from the moment she stepped into the Feng residence, Shenyang County already belonged to her. Feng Ren was still as elegant and humorous as before. He and Jiang Pingji did not engage in bureaucratic jargon. Instead, he asked about Lu Shi's recent situation. Looking at the content of their conversation, it did not seem like they were discussing the ownership of Shenyang County. It was more like a casual conversation between an elder and a junior. The atmosphere was exceptionally harmonious. There was not a hint of anger. Feng Ren sighed with emotion. Lu Shi is not a good person, but he has raised a good son. He and Lu Shi were friends of gentlemen. The two were often compared. He was slightly better than Feng Ren, but he did not expect his children and grandchildren to lose. Lu Shi only had one son, but this one son was more promising than all three of his sons. Jiang Pingji had personally come to Shenyang County from Fengyi County. This was enough to show her sincerity. Feng Ren was not someone who would push his luck. She had already agreed to the most important condition. The other conditions were just icing on the cake. To the Feng family they were not essential. Therefore, Feng Ren did not make things difficult for Jiang Pingji. Instead, he expressed his goodwill. The atmosphere was very harmonious. When the sincere conversation ended, Feng Ren ordered Feng Gui to personally send her off. On the way, Feng Gui secretly observed Jiang Pingji and invited her. Today, the residence plans to invite the chief of Shenyang County. I wonder if Lanting would like to attend the banquet? Jiang Pingji perked up. She knew the main course had arrived. She said, "It is my honor to be invited by the residents." Although the Feng family could decide the ownership of Shenyang County, they still had to inform the chief of the decision. Feng Gui was Feng Jin's elder brother. Jiang Pingji had to give him face. Therefore, when Feng Gui tried to probe her, she did not mind and responded smoothly. Seeing this, Feng Gui was secretly satisfied. After the banquet, Feng Ren asked him about his impression of Jiang Pingji. Feng Gui replied, "This person is quite talented. Why you did not choose the wrong person?" No matter what he asked, Jiang Pingji always had her own understanding. Although it was a little unconventional, it was not without basis. Even someone as conservative and inflexible as Feng Gui could not help but agree with Jiang Pingji's opinion. What made him even happier was that Jiang Pingji already had a rather comprehensive plan for the future cultivation and recuperation of Shenyang County. If she followed her plan, Shenyang County would be able to walk out of the haze of war in less than a year and a half. She was indeed a talented person. Before the conversation, Feng Gui had thought that Jiang Pingji was young and impulsive. After a long discussion, he gave up on the idea. Although Lu Shi is young, he is extremely shrewd. His words and actions are quite graceful. I've tested him several times. No matter what I asked, no matter how tricky the content was, he was able to answer it smoothly. It's clear that he's well prepared. It would not be a bad thing to hand Shenyang County over to him. Why you chose him after careful consideration? Father, you can rest assured. Feng Ren said, "I'm not worried about Lu Shi. I'm worried about Lu Shi." Feng Gui did not understand. Lu Shi had an extremely good reputation in Dongqing. If not for the secret suppression of the royal family, he would have long been a renowned scholar. Feng Ren sighed. "You don't know, Lu Shi is very black-hearted. He's willing to hide behind the scenes and let his son, Lu Shi, work hard in the outside world. This is beyond my expectations. I'm afraid that this pair of father and son will not be able to withstand the test of power. One day, they will fall out and become enemies." Feng Ren was shocked. That can't be right. If Lu Shi is really ambitious, he can do it himself. There are many people who are willing to surrender. Lu Shi was not Lu Shi. The former had everything he wanted, while the latter had yet to grow up. When the two were put together, even a fool would know which was more attractive. If Lu Shi was ambitious, and he was willing to stand up, perhaps half of the north would already be in Lu Shi's hands. His father's evaluation of Lu Shi had always been very positive. Why was he suddenly so worried today? I hope I'm overthinking, but this Lu Shi, it's really hard to say. At this point, Feng Ren suddenly paused. He sighed and did not continue. On the other side, Feng Jin thought of Jiang Pingji's illegitimate brother. He mentioned it to her, so that she would not make a wedding dress for others in the future. Lanting, it's not that I want to sow discord between you and Uncle, but in the eyes of the world, you are a woman after all. You can't inherit the family business. Uncle Lu is obedient to you now, but it doesn't mean that he won't feel empty in the future. He will remarry, or put his illegitimate son in an important position. Although he is only an illegitimate son, he is still a son who can continue the family line. He can carry on the family line for the Lu family. Feng Jin and Jiang Pingji talked in secret. They did not address her as Lord, but called her by her courtesy name. Jiang Pingji was silent for a moment. She said, I've thought about what you said. Huh? Feng Jin was surprised. His lord had already thought about this? Jiang Pingji's expression became thought-provoking. He did not know if it was an illusion, but her face seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow. Why you? I plan to find an opportunity to reveal my identity, she said. Feng Jin's mind was blown by the news. You want to reveal your identity? Why? Jiang Pingji said. To prevent others from taking advantage of me. I can't hide it forever. According to what you said, the illegitimate son is still a son. I have to guard against him. If I use my identity as a woman to stabilize everything, he won't have a chance to fight for it. Somehow, Feng Jin felt that Jiang Pingji's words had a deeper meaning, but he could not decipher it for the time being. All right, but you must find a suitable opportunity. Don't act rashly. Feng Jin frowned. He felt that it was good for Jiang Pingji to reveal her identity, so that she would not tremble in fear in the future. However, he did not know if others could accept it. I know. Jiang Pingji looked down to hide the light in her eyes. Lu Shi had an illegitimate daughter in his backyard, Lu Huan. She was the illegitimate daughter of Wang Huiyan and Prince Changshu. The illegitimate son was also not Lu Shi's son. After all, Lu Shi had once said that he only had one wife, Gu Min, and no other women. Using the illegitimate son was just to divert the enemy's attention. Jiang Pingji already knew who the enemy was. The illegitimate son's presence in the backyard was even lower than Lu Huan's. If she did not deliberately remind him, she would also ignore him. However, ignoring him did not mean that he did not exist. The outside world still thought that he was Lu Shi's illegitimate son, including the illegitimate son himself. Although he was an illegitimate son, he could inherit the family business if there were no other brothers. Jiang Pingji smiled coldly. According to Lu Shi's petty nature, he could adopt the daughter of his enemy, Wang Huiyan, as an illegitimate daughter. He, who knew what this illegitimate son's background was? She already had a rough deduction in her heart. She only needed to verify it with his father-in-law Wei Yuan. Chapter 612. What did bandits do? They were bandits who made a living by burning, killing, and looting. They specialized in doing bad things, not good things, and harming others to benefit themselves. However, ever since a valiant female bandit leader came to this mountain, the bandits realized that they could change their name to Lei Feng. Hey, do you guys think there's something wrong with this boss of ours? We're bandits, not government officials. We're only in charge of robbing and killing. Why do we have to cultivate farmland, do farm work, and do all those weird things? It's so embarrassing. One of the bandits secretly rubbed his head, then looked at the house in the middle of the bandit stronghold. Who cares if there's something wrong with her brain? We can't beat her anyway. Another patrolling bandit muttered in a low voice. We can't beat her. She can smash your head open with one punch. Who dares to provoke her? Didn't you see what happened to our previous boss? His neck was directly broken by 2 fingers, and he slowly stopped breathing. I saw it. His tongue was sticking out for a long time. The bandit stronghold was originally a gathering place for men. Women only had one role here, to warm the bed and satisfy their lust. However, A valiant woman had descended from the sky and single-handedly knocked down all the men in their stronghold. At first, they were afraid of the other party's strength and had no choice but to submit. After a while, the original leaders were dissatisfied with her tyranny and protested seriously. Men, especially the hot-blooded bandits who were used to living a dissolute life, how could they stand not having a woman by their side? Unfortunately, the women that the bandits had kidnapped were all released by the female bandit leader. The female bandit leader was the only woman in the entire stronghold. Under the influence of various emotions, the original leaders planned to sneak attack the new female bandit leader and tie her up to use her as a prostitute. The result could be imagined. Before the leaders could make a move, the female bandit leader had already taken the initiative. In front of all the brothers in the stronghold, she strangled them to death, crushed their necks, and rewarded their corpses to the tigers that she had caught. His words evoked a cruel memory, and his companion shuddered. Since then, all the men in the bandit stronghold had been traumatized. Those who could escape did so, and those who had nowhere to run could only tremble and work for the female leader. No one dared to look at her directly, afraid that she would chop them into pieces. "Hey, don't scare me, I'm a coward. I had nightmares for half a month after that day." The bandit couldn't help but tremble when he thought about how he had just cursed the female boss for having a problem with her brain. On the other side, Jiang Pingji was too lazy to care about these rumors. To her, it didn't matter if these bandits were loyal to her or not. What was important was that they were obedient. There are so many bandit strongholds nearby. She promoted a clever bandit to be her inept advisor. It was said that before he became a bandit, he was a scholar with a bit of fame. He had studied for 2 years and could recognize a few words. Sigh. The weather hasn't been good these past few years. How many people can't survive? The high officials in the imperial court only care about themselves. How much tax does a family have to pay every year? How many people are driven to death? If they can't survive, they can only become bandits. Therefore, there are quite a lot of bandit strongholds nearby. Jiang Pingji frowned. Tax? Will people be driven to death if they can't pay their taxes? She rarely spoke. When she spoke, she had an accent. No one knew where she was from, and it sounded very awkward. The inept advisor was surprised. Where did this boss come from? She didn't even know about this. Isn't that so? If they can't collect taxes, they will rob everything in the house that can be sold. If they have a pretty daughter at home, they might even kidnap her and sell her. Anyway, there are all kinds of tragedies. These days, people who reincarnate as adults are born to suffer. Jiang Pingji was silent for a while. She remembered that Widow Zhao's husband was violently shoved by the tax collectors. He accidentally fell to the ground, and his head hit a rock and died. Every time this matter was brought up, Widow Zhao's face would turn deathly pale, and her eyes would reveal a look of despair and pain. The current situation was not good. There were many commoners who became bandits. The government could not be bothered to control these bandits. Suppressing bandits also required a lot of manpower, material resources, and financial resources. The money allocated by the higher-ups was deducted layer by layer. Therefore, the bandits became even more unscrupulous. They burned, killed, looted, or fought and annexed each other. Not long after Jiang Pingji occupied the stronghold, her peers came to fight. They heard that the bandit stronghold had just changed leaders. They thought that the stronghold's vitality was greatly damaged, and they could take advantage of it. However, the outcome was often unexpected. Not only did they not succeed in robbing the stronghold, but Jiang Pingji led a group of subordinates to raid the stronghold. She counted all kinds of income expressionlessly. No wonder so many people become bandits. It's indeed faster to earn money by robbing. The bandits kneeling on the ground were trembling with fear. Some of them could not help but wet their pants. They had urinary incontinence. They could not be blamed for being too cowardly. It was because Jiang Pingji was too ruthless in killing people. They fought their way in from the entrance of the stronghold. There were corpses lying under their feet. When they got up, they looked like ferocious ghosts who had crawled out of hell. Bandits were braver than ordinary people. But to put it bluntly, they were still mortals. How could they withstand the oppression of her aura? For others, aura was something that was accumulated over a long period of time. For Jiang Pingji, the oppression of her spiritual realm forcibly imprinted the slave mark in people's minds, so that they would not have the slightest desire to resist when facing her. With the financial income this time, Jiang Pingji increasingly liked to find trouble. On one hand, she increased the extra income of the stronghold, and on the other hand, she expanded the territory and manpower. Gradually, Jiang Pingji became a famous bandit in Hejing County. Some of the bandit strongholds did not need her to fight for them. They took the initiative to come to her. In just half a year, the population of the stronghold had increased from a few dozen to 4,000 or 5,000. It directly alarmed the Hejing County chief. The Hejing County chief was trembling with fear. He was afraid that Jiang Pingji was going to cause trouble. But Jiang Pingji was not that bored. Instead, she restrained her subordinates and set several strict rules. If anyone violated them, they would be directly chopped up and fed to the tigers. However, if the bandits did not have the great income, how would the 4,000 or 5,000 people survive? Of course there was. Jiang Pingji ordered people to reclaim the wasteland and rely on themselves. At the same time, she selected bandits with better physique and specifically trained them in martial arts. She asked them to escort the merchant teams that traveled from south to north for a certain escort fee. Now that the world was in chaos, business was not so easy to do. The merchant teams were often robbed by bandits. If it was light, they would lose their money. If it was heavy, they would lose their lives. Once they encountered one, they would lose all their hard-earned money. It was the first time for many merchants to hear that bandits did not rob or kill people. Instead, they became escorts. Speaking of which, were they really not embezzling? Because there was no competition in the same industry, it was relatively easy for them to accept business. They directly guarded the main road and put on a posture of one man guarding the pass against 10,000 people. They forcefully blackmailed and accepted the escort business. So, were the merchants willing to pay a little money to hire them as escorts, or were they waiting to be robbed? Chapter 6:13. In another room, Enchanting secretly hid some of his food and belongings in a secret place. After making sure that everything was safe, he went back to report as if nothing had happened. He had been forced to deliver a letter. He had not eaten his fill for a few days, and his clothes were simple and crude. That was why he had fainted in the snow and almost lost his life. When he returned to a small village near Qingda County, he was immediately surrounded by a few simple and honest brothers who were loyal to him. Although these brothers were rude and did not know how to read, they had a warm and sincere heart. "Big brother, why did you only come back after so many days? You made me so worried," a dark-faced man said anxiously. Seeing the sincerity in his eyes and the lack of pretense, one could tell that his anxiety was genuine. If it weren't for the others holding him back, he, who had a bad temper, would have rushed out to look for someone long ago. He wouldn't have cared so much. "Big brother, the clothes you're wearing. Did something happen?" Enchanting secretly waved his hand, motioning for his brothers to keep quiet. He looked around as if to see if there were any spies around. Seeing this, another strong man spoke up in understanding. "Don't worry, big brother. There are only us brothers here. There's no one else. We can all trust you." Enchanting felt very insecure. He had to confirm it himself before he could be at ease. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He hurriedly summoned his brothers and trusted subordinates into the house. This small thatched hut was simple and crude, so Enchanting didn't dare to speak loudly. His brows were filled with fatigue, but he still forced himself to stay awake. He spoke earnestly to his brothers. "In my opinion, the Red Lotus group won't be able to hold out for long. The world is too difficult now. As your big brother, even if I don't think for myself, I have to think for your future. If we are tied to the sinking ship of the Red Lotus group, we don't know how we will die in the future." His brothers were simple and honest. The Red Lotus group's brainwashing methods had no effect on them. That was why he could say these words without worry. For these men, the Red Lotus group was a place to stay that provided them with food and clothing. It wasn't their final destination. The honest, dark-faced man opened his mouth and said, "Wherever Big Brother goes, I'll go." I'll follow you for the rest of my life. The Red Lotus group isn't a good place. Let's find another one. The other men were almost as honest. Although they didn't say anything, the dark-faced man had spoken their minds. The other person looked slightly more refined and spoke in a more genteel manner. He said, "What's Big Brother's plan? Just say it. We brothers are willing to climb a mountain of swords and dive into a sea of flames. We won't say anything more." And Shui was secretly satisfied. Only then did he reveal his complete plan. The brothers were startled and looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they couldn't decide what to do. Did their big brother mean to say that he was preparing to set up his own organization and use the Red Lotus Group as a stepping stone to establish his own business? The black-faced man was a bit more impulsive, and he was the first to stand up for Shui. Whatever Big Brother does, Little Brother will do. The Tsingy army was openly robbing, while the Red Lotus Group was secretly deceiving. They were a nest of snakes and rats, and all of them were King evil. Big Brother is kind-hearted, talented, and capable. It's really unfair for him to be in such a small position. He might as well seize this opportunity and kill him. If he won the bet, he could make his own decisions. If he lost, the worst that could happen was that he would lose his lowly life. What kind of dog's life are we brothers living now? If it weren't for Big Brother taking care of us, the weeds on our graves might be as tall as a man. The black-faced man was extremely emotional. Although his words were very crude, they had struck a sore spot for everyone. If it weren't for Shui taking care of them, they would indeed not have survived in the Red Lotus Group. Thinking of the frostbite on Shui's hands and feet, and the fact that he had to share food and clothes with them, their minds were instantly dominated by emotions. The slightly gentle-looking man held back the surging emotions in his chest. Fourth brother is right. If we don't think of a way out now, Big Brother will be dragged down to death sooner or later. Now that there's such a good way out in front of us, if we don't take the risk, we'll definitely regret it in the future. Wasn't it just being a spy and stabbing the Red Lotus Group in the back? It wasn't like they couldn't do it. But someone hesitated. The black-faced man said in a tiger's voice, "What but is there?" The other party was a bit clumsy. After a while he stammered and finished his sentence. "But why did such a good thing fall into our Big Brother's hands? Could it be a trap?" This was indeed what everyone was worried about. They were afraid that Jiang Pingji would go back on her word and burn the bridge after crossing it. However, Shui said, "We have to believe in this matter. Even if we don't help, do you think these people from the Red Lotus Group can defend Qingda County? Although they claim to have 100,000 members, look at them. How many of them can fight and kill? Fengyi County really has 20,000 elite troops. It's a bit exaggerated to fight 1 against 10, but it's definitely not a problem for them to fight 1 against 5. If that's the case, do we even have a chance to contribute?" For Jiang Pingji's side, there were only 2 scenarios for attacking Qingda County. One, they could easily take it down. The other, they could expend some effort and lose a certain number of troops before taking it down. In Shui's opinion, Jiang Pingji was the foolish son of a landlord, but Lu Shi, who stood behind her, was certainly not foolish. Who didn't cherish their reputation in the early stages of a business? Even if Jiang Pingji didn't cherish it, Lu Shi would surely understand. Therefore, going back on his word would definitely not happen. And Shui said solemnly, "Our future depends on this." The more refined man looked worried and troubled. Even if they wanted to do something big, they had to have enough manpower. "Big Brother, we'll do as you say, but won't we have too few people?" And Shui took out a heavy pouch from his sleeve and poured out the bulging bag of silver and gold. There was firewood burning in the room, so the light wasn't too dim. When the shiny white silver was poured out, it sparkled and almost blinded everyone's eyes. And Shui was satisfied, but his expression was solemn as he said, "There's no hurry. There's still some time before spring. We'll plan slowly. Brothers, this matter concerns the lives of all of us, so we must be extremely cautious. We must absolutely not reveal even half a word of this." The men cupped their fists and said in unison, "Don't worry, Big Brother." As the saying went, money made things easier, and Shui used the money and provisions Jiang Pingji provided to win over another batch of low-level members of the Red Lotus group. On the other hand, Shenyang County had truly been included in Jiang Pingji's sphere of influence. There were many aristocratic families in Shenyang County, but apart from the Feng family, the other aristocratic families were all small in scale. Jiang Pingji didn't have to worry about their thoughts at all. The Feng family had handed Shenyang County over to Jiang Pingji. In reality, they were transferring military power, finances, and government affairs. Jiang Pingji currently couldn't command the local troops in Shenyang County, so she could only transfer a portion of her own troops over. Her territory had doubled, which meant that the workload of her subordinates had also doubled. Naturally, she had to continue recruiting troops and buying horses. Feng Zhen held his forehead. Well, are you planning to tire us to death? What vacation, what fun? What wild horses that would run free in Shenyang County were all lies. What about being able to rest after being busy for a while? It was all a lie. The truth was that she would be busy for a while every year, and the while would last for a year. Chapter 6:14. Feng Zhen looked as if he had nothing left to live for. If I continue to believe your words, I'll have forgotten to bring my brain out of the house. Wei Xi laughed involuntarily at Feng Zhen's ridicule. With the changes in power in Shenyang County, the gentry clans other than the Feng family were all restless. Why? Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Jiang Pingji lacked manpower, especially capable ones. Due to the current difficulties in education, most scholars came from gentry clans. In other words, if Jiang Pingji were to recruit talents, she would definitely choose from these gentry clans. This was a good opportunity for them to openly meddle in the political affairs of Shenyang County. As long as they occupied most of the authority, Shenyang County would still belong to them, and not Jiang Pingji, an outsider. Many people had similar conversations, the core of which revolved around Jiang Pingji. That Lu Shi is just a naughty child. He wants us to listen to him. Wishful thinking. If it was Lu Shi, I would be willing to consider it. His son. He's still wet behind the ears. Does he really think he can do whatever he wants just because he has some troops? These gentry clans couldn't understand what was wrong with the Feng family, that they were willing to hand over such a large Shenyang County. It was as if they were bewitched. No matter what, this was a chance for them to make a name for themselves. Who wouldn't want to advance? The Feng family was stupid, but they wouldn't. Someone agreed. Master is right. Lu Shi is still in his 20s. His behavior is childish, and his thinking is naive. The Feng family is making a huge mistake by handing Shenyang County to someone like him. How can Lu Shi manage 2 counties with only the manpower he has? In the end, they would be overwhelmed with work. Wouldn't they still have to recruit talents to fill the ranks? As long as they seize this opportunity, they might have a chance to turn the tables and make Lu Shi a mere figurehead. Not just Shenyang County, but even Fingyi County that Lu Shi had conquered would become theirs. Many gentry clans had this thought. In the past, with the Feng family suppressing them, they couldn't compete with them. Now that it was a wet behind the ears kid, would they not have a chance? Lu Shi wasn't by their side. They weren't afraid that they couldn't coax the kid. They were all waiting anxiously in the dark. They were waiting for Jiang Pingji to run out of manpower and ask for their help. At that time, it would be the best time for these landowning households to display their talents. Feng Gui was born into an aristocratic family and was used to such schemes. He was afraid that Jiang Pingji did not understand the situation in Shenyang County, so he kindly reminded her. Although it was impossible for him to be loyal to Jiang Pingji, it was not a problem to kindly remind her. Feng Gui did not make it too obvious. He only hinted vaguely. A lot of landowning households will send invitations to Lanting soon, Jiang Pingji said. I'm so busy that I don't even have time to sleep. Who would be so blind as to send me a visitation card? Even if she sent a visiting card, it was impossible for her to attend. She didn't have the time to do so. Feng Gui laughed and said, Lanting is ultimately a citizen of Hejian, and not a native of Shenyang County. Now that you have taken over Shenyang County, even though you don't have the title of county governor, you do have the power of county governor. In order to manage a county, you have to place your own trusted aides. However, this will inevitably harm the interests of those people. They are uncertain, so it is normal for them to find an opportunity to worm information out of you. If Jiang Pingji did not appear even once, the people would be anxious, and it would easily cause trouble. Feng Gui said, I'm saying this to let you know so that you won't get into trouble in the future. The Feng family had handed over Shenyang County, but this did not mean that Jiang Pingji had completely taken over the area. She still had to solve the complicated network of interests of the landowning households in Shenyang County. If she did not handle it well and angered them, they would use violence and refuse to cooperate. Shenyang County's various government affairs and agencies would be left unattended. Not to mention a few days, even half a day's work would cause unrest, so she had to be mentally prepared. The audience did not understand. Feng Gui was speaking mysteriously. They could not understand him at all. Why was he speaking in riddles? Watching movies today. Is there anyone in the streaming room who can explain? Why can't I understand what Feng Gui is saying? Is there something wrong with my IQ? Although I can't understand their conversation, I have a feeling that a storm is brewing. Wonder Woman. Why do I feel that Feng Gui's words are easy to understand? To put it bluntly, the streamer is a powerful outsider. In Shenyang County, other than the colossal Feng family, there are many local tyrants with connections. If she doesn't handle these local tyrants well, and they cause trouble, the streamer will suffer. I think Feng Gui is reminding the streamer of this. If it was in their era, Shenyang County would be considered a first-tier city. In a place like this, even a small official with the size of a sesame seed would be able to squeeze out a lot of fat and greasy oil. Trench Chong Feng. Indeed, the local landowning households are very troublesome. They have been operating in Shenyang County for many years. The streamer is someone who came out of nowhere. If she wants to completely control Shenyang County, she will definitely have to place her own people in important positions. At the same time, this action will cause the local landowning households to hand over their rights and interests. Robbing people of their wealth is equivalent to killing their parents. Not to mention the rights that affect the development of the family. Wanru. No way, it's so complicated. But why didn't the streamer have this problem when she conquered Fengyi County? Anti-Japanese show Ci Gizi. Have you forgotten? Fengyi County has 4 districts. Malan District, Xiangyang District, Jiaoping District and Shingan District. Which one of them has not been robbed by the Tsingyi army? Besides the country gentry and wealthy merchants, the richest people are the landowning households. Who else would the Tsingyi army rob if not them? Precisely because the Tsingyi army has already exterminated these people, Jiang Pingji did not face any resistance when she rebuilt Fengyi County. Shenyang County is different. The power of the landowning households is well preserved. If Jiang Pingji interferes with their interests, there will definitely be a conflict between the two parties. Unless Jiang Pingji is willing to stand in the same trench as them. Yuzhu Hao Shui. According to what you said, the Tsingyi army is not useless. At least they helped the streamer get rid of the local power? What should we do now? Why don't the streamer test their bottom line first? If they can accept it, we can pretend to be courteous with them. If Jiang Pingji was not a person with her own ideas, the livestream audience's suggestion would probably be her best choice. Feng Gui revealing this to her was actually subtly indicating to her that the landowning households of Shenyang County were difficult to deal with. He was warning her not to easily confront them. Unfortunately, Jiang Pingji was not one to be swayed by force or persuasion, let alone threats. If these landowning households knew their place, Jiang Pingji would not touch them. If they were disobedient. She muttered to herself for a while. Thank you, Huaizhang, for telling me about this. I already have a plan in mind. I'll go back and discuss it with the other gentlemen. Feng Gui nodded. The two of them tacitly brushed the matter aside, as if they had never discussed it. Chapter 6:15. What do you mean, my lord? Feng Jin was a native of Shenyang County. He knew the aristocratic circles of the place very well. Their opinions were secondary. Jiang Pingji's attitude was the most important. If she was weak and chose to yield to the pressure of the aristocratic families in Shenyang County, They could only suggest that Jiang Pingji appease the emotions of those people and plan for the future. If she was stubborn, Feng Jin naturally had a way to keep them busy and not spare the energy to bother her. Jiang Pingji was their lord. The lord's attitude would greatly affect the strategist's decision. What do I mean? Jiang Pingji smiled. She said, I'm the master of Shangyang County now. Since when is it their turn? If they simply want to help and take advantage of me, it's not that I can't tolerate it. But if they take advantage of me, do you think I can tolerate it? Whatever entered her pocket was hers. It was the same for Shangyang County. She didn't care if these aristocratic families were local tyrants. They had to obediently cower in front of her. If they didn't listen, they couldn't blame her for being ruthless. Wei Xiai smiled. According to my lord's temperament, she naturally can't tolerate it. She had always been the one to be bullied by others. When had others ever given her a hard time? Not to mention the aristocratic families in Shangyang County. In her previous life, Jiang Pingji was a bandit with tens of thousands of troops. The Dongqing court couldn't do anything about her. They had no choice but to recruit her. She was appointed as the county magistrate of Hu County, with the intention of using the vicious and merciless aristocrats in Hu County to frame her. Who would have thought that she would kill all of them instead? From then on, no one in Hu County dared to question her. If she said one, no one dared to say another. Of course, the beginning of the two lives was different. As the emperor who was born a bandit, she killed whoever she wanted. She killed whoever made a fuss. She didn't care about her reputation at all. She was very willful. Now she was Lu Shi's son. She had a reputation and a shackle. She couldn't be as willful and ruthless as she had been in her previous life. She couldn't fight. She could only use her wits. However, no matter how much a person changed, their style would never change. Even if she used her wits, it would still be terrifying. Feng Jin coughed softly. He hugged the hot water in his arms tightly and took a sip of hot tea to slightly dispel the chill in his body. Once my lord starts like this, how will she be different from a puppet in the future? He had to be more forceful in this matter. In terms of money and grain, the lord's wealth may not be comparable to that of a country, but it is more than enough to feed 2 counties. Why do you need their support? The only shortcoming is talents. According to the lord's current foundation, there is indeed a shortage of talents. This is also a problem. No matter how talented Feng Jun and the others were, they were still just a few people. They could not be compared to a few hundred people. Jiang Pingji did not lack top-notch talents, nor did she lack the most basic talents. What she lacked, however, were intermediate talents who were not as good as the best, but were better than the worst. Even if Jiang Pingji had found a way to open an academy and nurture some useful talents. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough time. They hadn't even finished the first semester. It would take another 2 to 3 years before they could put it to use. If she accepted the talent assistance from the local aristocrats, Jiang Pingji's team could be considered to have taken shape. However, there is no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Everything comes with a price. The powerful gentry clans could secretly control the succession of the throne. Jiang Pingji had only progressed so far. If the gentry clans took advantage of the loophole and controlled the right to speak, she would only be another Dongqing emperor. No matter how well she lived in the future, she would always be under the control of the gentry clans. This topic was somewhat awkward for Feng Jin, who asked him to be born in such a high position. However, as a strategist, he had to think of Jiang Pingji's immediate interests. Why not let them restrain each other? We can temporarily maintain a more balanced state. After a few years they can recover, Feng Jin suggested. The gentry clans in Shangyang County are complicated. There are interests and disputes between each family. If we make use of them appropriately, we don't have to worry about them stirring up trouble. Jiang Pingji frowned as she listened. Wei Xiai and Feng Jun were both foreigners. They did not understand the local situation, as well as Feng Jin. Feng Jin's suggestion was considered more feasible at the moment. The balance of power was also one of the keys to governing. Wai Yu's suggestion is feasible. However, Zixiao and I do not understand the situation in Shangyang County. If we do this, we can only hand this matter over to Huaiyu. I'm afraid it will be more difficult. Feng Zhen was all smiles as he held the hot water in his hands. It was as if he could see the scene of Feng Jin being busy all year and not being able to return home. Feng Jin smiled bitterly to himself. He could not stand the sight of Feng Zhen, the prodigal son. He did not expect Feng Zhen to witness his antics. However, Jiang Pingji said, Huayu's suggestion is a good idea. However, this is also treating the symptoms and not the root cause. Although they have conflicts and disputes, they are not irreconcilable. If you play with balance too much, you will eventually lose control. Instead of doing this, why not take drastic measures? She still had no way to make the local gentry clans in Shangyang County a mere figurehead, but she could weaken them step by step. Drastic measures? Although Feng Jin was born in a gentry clan, the Feng family was watching from the sidelines. He did not need to be conflicted. His lord's interests were the direction he should go. Feng Zhen asked, How do we take drastic measures? Don't stick to one pattern. Select talents. Jiang Pingji's eyes shone as she said, Talents are also divided into different grades. What we need are not virtuous people who can rule the world. Our standards are not that high. In Shangyang County, other than the gentry clans, everyone else is an idiot, right? No matter if they are poor or from a humble background. Regardless of their status, as long as they are talented, virtuous, and capable, they can all be recruited. Fengyi County did not have such conditions, but Shangyang County was different. There was a strong learning culture there. There was no lack of talents. Not only did she want to open an academy to nurture her own talents, but she also wanted to recruit talents that could be used. In this era, to become an official, one needed family background, appearance, virtue, and ability. Among them, family background was the most important. If there were no special circumstances, official positions could be inherited. To put it bluntly, it was better to be born well than to be well educated. And it was better to have good parents than to be born well. Ability was not important at all. Jiang Pingji's words were, in a sense, a challenge to the entire human resource system of this era. Feng Jin secretly glanced at Wei Xi and Feng Zhen's expressions. Both of them looked slightly agitated. He secretly sighed in his heart but did not say anything. Feng Zhen asked, My lord wants to replace all the people? Jiang Pingji snorted and said, Replace all of them? How is that possible? I don't want to be poisoned to death when I go out and drink a cup of water. Replacing all of them meant completely robbing the interests of the gentry clans. It would be strange if they did not go crazy. Wei Xi said, My lord, I'm afraid you want to first replace those who are not important and wait for them to familiarize themselves with the situation before making any plans. Apart from not alerting or angering the gentry clans, another important reason was that the newly recruited talents were not familiar with their positions and would easily cause trouble. It was better to leave them in an unimportant place to gain experience for a while before transferring them. This period of time would be enough for Jiang Pingji to gain a firm foothold. This was not only taking drastic measures, but it was also a delaying tactic. The gentry clans were not afraid of 20,000 troops. What about 50,000 or even 100,000? Chapter 616. The news of the change of ownership of Shangyang County spread quickly. Huang Song, who was far away in Diang district of Maota County in Haozhou, knew about it. Huang Song had just received the news and hurriedly looked for his trusted subordinates to discuss it. Under the management of Feng Ju, Cheng Jing, and a few other newly recruited strategists, Huang Song was still the district magistrate of Diang district on the surface. But in reality, he had slowly infiltrated the entire Maota County. Coupled with the eloquence of the strategists, the most difficult aristocratic families were settled one by one. With steady progress, the seemingly unattractive Huang Song now had some capital. Huang Song was especially concerned about Jiang Pingji's situation, probably because they were close in age and used to be friends who played together. Now that he had just received the news, he could not wait to discuss it with his strategists. Feng Ju was not surprised by the news of the change of ownership of Shangyang County. After all, his second brother was in Jiang Pingji's camp. This was harmony. Not only that, but she also had a natural geographical advantage. Fengyi County and Shangyang County were both within Wanzhou. This was geographical advantage. Moreover, Shangyang County was not an advantage for the Feng family, which had a weak military force. Instead, it was a burden. This was timing. In this way, Jiang Pingji had timing, geographical advantage, and harmony. It was only a matter of time before Shangyang County fell into her hands. If Huangsong's territory could be in the north and be close to Shangyang County, Fengju would also have the confidence to convince the Feng family. Now the matter was settled. His tightly knitted brows relaxed. Fengju had already put on a crown. His face had lost its childishness, and he appeared calm and steady. He comforted him unhurriedly. "Don't worry, my lord. I know what the situation in Shangyang County is. If Lu Shi takes over now, he will lose everything if he doesn't handle it well. The Feng family has retired, and the other aristocratic families are no longer suppressed. Lu Shi will probably be overwhelmed with work." Even in a small Diang district, the various forces were intricate, not to mention the circle of aristocratic families in Shangyang County. Although they were not large in scale, their ancestors had been operating in Shangyang County for generations, and they had a deep foundation. Compared to Diang district, the difficulty of conquering Shangyang County was definitely more than 10 times higher. Cheng Jing frowned and said disapprovingly, "I don't know much about Lu Shi, but his advisors Wei Ci, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, Feng Jin. None of them are easy to deal with. Lu Shi's foundation is gradually stabilizing. Shangyang County may not be able to make him stumble." When Jiang Pingji was studying in Langyi Academy, Cheng Jing had already left to take up an official post. He only stayed in the academy for a few days in 3 years, and it was to congratulate Master Yuan Jing on his birthday. Therefore, the relationship between Cheng Jing and Jiang Pingji was limited to a nodding acquaintance. They both knew of such a person, but they did not have a deep understanding of each other. It was fine if Cheng Jing did not understand Jiang Pingji, but he understood his junior brother Wei Ci. He understood the few friends Wei Ci had. They were not famous, but each of them was a dragon among men. Even if she could only get one, the Lord would be overjoyed, not to mention a few of them. Shangyang County might be a tough nut to crack for others, but for Lu Shi, who had a strong and powerful faction, it was nothing more than a stumbling block on the road. It was so small that he could just step over it. It was unrealistic to hope that Shangyang County would be able to hold Lu Shi back. Feng Ju sighed to himself. He and Cheng Jing still did not have the slightest tacit understanding. He spoke ambiguously, but was it not to obscure the main point, to appease Huang Song's inner anxiety, and to motivate him? Cheng Jing was an honest man, but he said whatever was on his mind. Wasn't this boosting others' morale and diminishing his own prestige? Feng Ju's mind spun, and he suddenly thought of something. He interrupted Huang Song's overthinking. He said to Cheng Jing, "I remember that Yumo seems to have an eldest nephew who holds a post in Haozhou?" Cheng Jing's eldest nephew, Cheng Cheng, whose courtesy name was Wenfu. After Huang Song heard this, his gaze turned to Cheng Jing, and he asked in surprise, "Yumo's eldest nephew? Why hadn't he heard of this?" Cheng Jing replied calmly, "Reporting to my lord, I do have a nephew who holds a post in Haozhou." Cheng Cheng was the district magistrate of Suiyan County in Fufing County of Haozhou. Because he did not like the intrigue in the officialdom, and he had no intention of climbing the ranks, he used his family's influence to obtain the position of district magistrate of Suiyan County. He had been in this position for more than 10 years, and he had never moved from this position. Cheng Jing was stunned. He did not know why Feng Ju suddenly mentioned Cheng Cheng. After thinking for a while, he instantly understood Feng Ju's intentions, and he was slightly displeased. Without waiting for Feng Ju to speak, Cheng Jing said, "If Huijia wants Wenfu to seek refuge with the Lord, I'm afraid it'll be difficult. I've already written a letter to Wenfu, but Wenfu is determined, and I can't easily persuade him. Moreover, his ambition isn't here, so there's no point in recruiting him." Although Cheng Cheng was almost a generation older than Cheng Jing, his eldest nephew was still his eldest nephew. As an uncle, he had to show the attitude of protecting his junior. If Cheng Cheng was unwilling to seek refuge with Huang Song, could Cheng Jing force him? Admittedly, If Cheng Cheng was willing to help Huang Song, as the district magistrate of Suiyan County and Fufing County of Haozhou, he could provide Huang Song with great convenience. He could even become a springboard for Huang Song to encroach on Fufing County. However, since Cheng Cheng was unwilling, Cheng Jing naturally would not force him. Feng Zhu looked embarrassed. He did not expect Cheng Jing to speak so bluntly. This caused the atmosphere in the hall to become slightly stagnant. After the meeting, Feng Zhu went to look for Cheng Jing in private. Huaijia, you don't go to a temple for no reason. Just say what you want. Cheng Jing was too upright. Although he was clever, his style of doing things tended to be more rigid. Feng Zhu also went straight to the point. Zhu wants to help the Lord plot for the entire Haozhou. The territory of Haozhou naturally included Suiyan County under Cheng Cheng's rule. Cheng Jing said, "Of course. If the Lord wants to advance further, Haozhou must be obtained. But you said that Cheng Cheng is unwilling to help the Lord." Cheng Jing frowned when he heard this. What was the conflict between Cheng Cheng's unwillingness to help Huang Song and Huang Song's plot for Haozhou? If Huang Song had the ability to conquer Haozhou, Cheng Cheng could just resign and live in seclusion. He did not have to work under Huang Song. Feng Zhu faintly had a headache. Cheng Jing still did not understand what he was implying. What I mean is, if Yumo's eldest nephew doesn't have this intention, he should resign and leave as soon as possible before the Lord conquers Haozhou. If Huang Song's influence grew stronger, and he slowly controlled Haozhou, Cheng Cheng would not be able to leave even if he wanted to. Yangtze had flown away under Huang Song's nose. This matter had already traumatized the latter. According to Huang Song's temper, those who could not be used by him could not be used by others either. Having one example like Yangtze was enough. Since it was still early, Feng Zhu directly said it. In the future, Feng Zhu did not want to see Cheng Jing and the Lord, Huang Song, become estranged because of Cheng Cheng. Cheng Jing was silent for a moment. He cupped his hands and bowed. "Thank you for the reminder." Chapter 617. It was a chilly winter. It was snowing in the north. With Jiang Pingji's financial and food support, and Chui's work of recruiting people in the Red Lotus group went very smoothly. And Chui was a smart man. Even if he had to recruit, and buy the hearts of the people at the bottom of the Red Lotus group, he didn't let his guard down. He didn't pick people who were very eye-catching. He specifically picked people who could be useful, but had a low presence, and were more reliable. Unknowingly, he had already won over hundreds of people. On the other side, Jiang Pingji put the focus of this winter's work on 3 things: recruiting talents, recruiting soldiers, and training troops. The first task was thrown to Feng Jin and Wei Xi. The former was familiar with the situation in Shangyang County, while the latter was meticulous and methodical in his work. With the two of them working together, Jiang Pingji didn't have to worry that no one would take the bait. The second task was given to Feng Zhen. Jiang Pingji had just taken over Shangyang County. Her territory had doubled in size out of nowhere. The 20,000 soldiers and horses that were considered plentiful were not enough. It was imperative to recruit more soldiers and buy more horses. Feng Zhen was too lazy. He hugged his blanket and slept until noon in the middle of winter. Jiang Pingji couldn't stand it anymore, so she simply gave him heavy work. What if he couldn't finish or slacked off halfway? For the whole year next year, he wouldn't get a drop of wine. Feng Zhen's already pale face suddenly turned as white as a sheet when he heard Jiang Pingji's words. With a lord like this, Feng Zhen wanted to jump ship at any moment. Forbidding a prodigal son from drinking? What did humans do? However, his thin and small arms couldn't win against Jiang Pingji's powerful legs. Feng Zhen could only do as she said. After a few days, heavy eye bags appeared under his eyes. He secretly bit his handkerchief at Wei Xi. Zixiao, according to this situation, will the 7 days of rest during the new year still count? Wei Xi comforted him gently. A gentleman keeps his word. My lord doesn't make promises easily. Once she makes a promise, she will definitely keep it. However, Jiang Pingji wasn't a gentleman. She was a woman. Wei Xi silently swallowed his words back into his stomach. His face was still smiling like a lily. A man with his own background music. Feng Zhen had only joined this group in the middle of the year. He didn't know the practices of previous years, so he reluctantly believed Wei Ci. To be honest, recruiting soldiers was not a hard task, but Jiang Pengji pursued the path of elite soldiers. When other people recruited soldiers, they trained for a month or two, or even 3 to 5 days before they could be deployed to the battlefield. She was different. Winter training lasted for 3 months, summer training for 3 months, spring plowing and autumn harvesting, and daily training went on day after day. According to Feng Zhen's understanding, Jiang Pengji had 20,000 elite soldiers under her command. Every soldier had to go through a rigorous training period before they entered the battlefield. In Jiang Pengji's words, a soldier who had not undergone rigorous training could not be considered a soldier. An unqualified soldier was not suitable for the battlefield. It was more suitable for him to go home and drink milk from his mother. Such a soldier would be cannon fodder on the battlefield. Apart from sacrificing his own life, what else could he do? Therefore, there was a certain threshold for Jiang Pengji to recruit soldiers. Not everyone could enter. As the person in charge of this mission, Feng Zhen was in charge of it. He also needed to register every recruit who successfully applied. After a few days, Feng Zhen felt like he couldn't even straighten his right hand. He had held the brush for too long, and his fingers were stiff. By the way, you haven't found the right person yet? Even a carefree prodigal like Feng Zhen couldn't help but go berserk when faced with such a heavy workload. He finally understood why Qiguan Rang, who was in charge of the household registration department, always had a deadpan expression on his face, as if everyone owed him 1,000,000 strings of coins. Wei Ci and Feng Jin leisurely sipped their tea. No rush, no rush. The net has been cast. I have a feeling that the rewards this time will be bountiful. Feng Zhen wanted to spit on him. I'd be a fool to believe you. They recruited talents. To put it bluntly, they held all kinds of poetry gatherings and invited the scholars of Shangyang County to participate. On the surface, they only talked about romance and not politics. In reality, they used this opportunity to understand the temperament, abilities, and talents of the scholars. If they felt that it was not bad, they would test the other party's willingness in private. What made Feng Zhen most envious was that all the expenses were paid by Jiang Pengji. Feng Jin and Wei Ci enjoyed it at public expense. Because of this, Feng Zhen couldn't help but suspect that the two of them were deliberately slacking off, so that they could enjoy it longer. F***ck. These two animals were so shameless. Why didn't they bring him for such a good thing? If they didn't want to bring him, then so be it. Why didn't Feng Zhen see a single talent for half a month? No talent meant that Feng Zhen had no helpers for his work. If you guys slack off, be careful that my lord will complain about you. Feng Jin couldn't help but laugh. Not only was he not angry, but he was happy. What did this mean? It meant that Feng Zhen was already suffocating from the heavy workload. He was exhausted from working overtime. As for the third task, training the troops, Jiang Pengji directly threw it to the generals. Similarly, the female troops were all trained by Jiang Nongqin. In the previous battles, there were a few female troops who performed well. They were all praised and promoted. Now they were also acting as instructors to train the new female troops. However, Shangyang County was a special area. It was prejudiced against female troops, so there weren't many female troops recruited. There were only about 1,000 of them. To be able to recruit more than 1,000 people, it was because too many people couldn't afford to keep them. They sent them over dubiously. On the other hand, the recruitment of male troops went smoothly. The total number of men reached 8,000. You're really something. Zishi's ability is really impressive. How long has it been? You've already recruited so many people? Jiang Pengji was surprised. Feng Zhen smiled bitterly. He admitted that he was capable, but he didn't dare to take all the credit for this matter. My lord, you're exaggerating. How is this true ability? It's clearly because my lord is too generous, and the conditions are too good. Although Shangyang County hadn't been conquered by the Tsingy army, or the Red Lotus group, it had been besieged for a long time. Moreover, there was a great drought this summer. The entire year's harvest wasn't high. The people's lives were poor. Some people's food was mixed with pig's feed. Why was Jiang Pingji said to be generous? The recruitment notice she gave clearly stated that the troops had 3 meals a day. Each meal consisted of 2 bowls of rice, 1 vegetable dish, 1 meat dish, and 1 soup. Afraid that the people wouldn't understand, the notice also stated the weight of the 2 bowls of rice and the ingredients for the meat and vegetable dishes. The notice had 200 words. 160 words were recipes, and the other 40 words were recruitment requirements. This was probably the weirdest recruitment notice Feng Zhen had ever seen in his life. Jiang Pingji obediently recruited and trained the troops. She didn't make any moves against the aristocrats of Shangyang County. This instead made the latter suspicious. They were afraid that she would launch a surprise attack. In the end, Jiang Pingji only changed some unimportant positions. There weren't any lucrative positions. The people who were replaced were still the poor local scholars. Although it was a little painful, it was still within the acceptable range of the local aristocrats. Seeing that the end of the year was approaching, Jiang Pingji was doing the year-end statistics. The messenger outside reported that the nominal county chief of Shangyang County had come to visit. She thought about the date. It wasn't the time to pay a New Year's greeting, was it? Invite him in, Jiang Pingji said. The county chief brought her an opened letter. When she opened it, it was stamped with the words, "Blessed by the heavens, I will live long and prosper." The imperial jade seal? She was surprised. She quickly scanned through the contents of the letter. Chapter 618. Has the battle in Qinzhou become so serious? Wei Xi and the others were urgently summoned by Jiang Pingji. They had just sat down when she handed them a letter. After reading through the contents of the letter, her jade-like face darkened. She involuntarily tightened her grip on the letter, leaving a mark on it. Even though Feng Zhen was the last to arrive, he was impatient and couldn't wait to send the message. Without caring about his image, he moved closer to Wei Xi. After seeing it clearly, Feng Zhen finally understood Wei Xi's astonishment. This is the Emperor's rescue? It can't be fake, right? Wei Xi shook his head and passed the letter to Feng Jin, who had been waiting for a long time. The seal at the end of the letter is indeed the imperial jade seal. Receive the mandate of the heavens, live forever and prosper. Other than the emperor, who would dare to use these words? Feng Jin sneered. Prince Changshu besieged Qinzhou in the name of ridding the emperor of evil. In order to protect himself, the emperor summoned the Meng family of Zhangzhou to lead their troops into the capital. This Meng family is interesting, betraying Prince Changshu's forces at the last minute. Isn't it enough that you've suffered a loss once? Now you've sent out an order to rescue the emperor to all parts of the country, summoning your officials to lead troops to save the emperor. Isn't the emperor afraid that there are people with bad intentions among those who respond to the rescue? In layman's terms, the monarch is in trouble, and the subjects are mobilizing their troops to rescue the emperor. Prince Changshu used the name of cleaning up the emperor's side, but in fact, it was also a form of protecting the emperor. It was just that Prince Changshu did not have good intentions. The Meng family of Zhangzhou also came to rescue the emperor, but in the end, they defected to Prince Changshu's camp at the last minute, which was equivalent to the emperor shooting himself in the foot. Feng Jin frowned and said, "If the emperor doesn't do this, he will lose his life." Although there were risks in summoning the whole world to rescue the emperor, at least they could use the officials who came to rescue the emperor to restrain Prince Changshu, who was at the peak of his power. If I'm lucky, I might be able to turn the situation around. Feng Jin laughed and said harshly, "Even your roots are rotten, and you still want to come back from the brink of death?" The royal family of Dongqing was like a rotten and withered towering tree. Its insides had long been hollowed out by pests, and its roots buried deep underground were also rotten and dead. Even the best gardener would not be able to save such a big tree. The royal family of Dongqing issued an edict to the world to rescue the king. Apart from dragging the whole of Dongqing into the quagmire of war, what other purpose did it serve? You're dreaming if you want to take this opportunity to make a comeback. Feng Zhen raised a hand to pick at his ear, then returned to his seat. He sat lazily, as if he didn't have any bones. Feng Jin carefully read the contents of the letter and did not miss a single word. After reading it, he asked Jiang Pengji, "What do you think, my lord? Rescue the emperor? Or was he pretending to be deaf and dumb?" Jiang Pengji said, "I haven't decided yet. Even though the royal family has long been in decline, and they no longer live up to their name is still there. As a subject who has received the king's edict, it is only right that I accept the edict and rush to their aid. It's just that this isn't a good season, so I don't really want to go." She frowned, but her expression did not show the slightest hesitation. "It's precisely because it's hard to make a decision that I want to hear your opinions before deciding whether or not to get involved." Sending troops to protect the emperor meant that all the forces in Dongqing, big and small, would gather in Shenzhou. When the time came, the elites would gather, and the heroes would meet. There would be a lot of talents, and perhaps future opponents would be among them. This was a good opportunity to poach someone. Jiang Pengji naturally did not want to miss such a lively event. However, just as she had said, it was not the right time to rescue the emperor. If she went, it might even be a bad thing. The original plan was to recover Qingde County in the spring of next year. With Shui supporting her from within the Red Lotus Group, coupled with the fact that the troops under her were all elites with extraordinary combat power, taking down Qingde County should be a sure thing. When the time came, she would absorb the power of the Red Lotus Group and further expand her own strength. Then, with the expanded military force, she would suppress the power of the aristocratic families in Shangyang County. Finally, she would replace the talents who had been trained with important positions. In this way, not only would she be able to occupy Qingde County, but she would also be able to completely control Shangyang County. At this point, the entire territory of Wanzhou would be under her control. Dongqing only had 6 states and 21 counties, but the father and son of the Lu family had already occupied Wanzhou and Chongzhou. In the future, the power to contend for hegemony was already in embryonic form. This set of plans was linked to each other. If everything went according to plan, the situation would be very good. If she mobilized troops to rescue the emperor, it would be a little difficult to make ends meet. If she was unlucky and her nest was raided, her family's assets would be gone. Feng Jin muttered, "But if you don't go, I'm afraid you'll become the target of public criticism and a live target." Jiang Pengji sighed softly. The 3 strategists were still thinking. She secretly opened the bullet screen in the streaming room to see the opinions of the idle viewers. "Little angels, I'm so disappointed. So it's this rescue of the emperor. I thought the emperor was going to confer the title of Rescue the Emperor. Good luck, Gaokao. The streamer is encroaching on the entire territory of Wanzhou as a district magistrate. To put it bluntly, she's a rebel and a traitor, yet she's being conferred the title of a king. However, she can use this opportunity to solidify the title of governor of Wanzhou. Sending troops to rescue the emperor isn't for nothing. There must be benefits." Yu Yusheng, I agree with the comment above. This is obviously a good opportunity. After all, the streamer's power is not weak now. If she can learn from Boss Chow and use the tactic of holding the emperor hostage and ordering disobedient subjects, that would be even more cool. Streamer, you're my goddess. Kneeling for a wave of monthly tickets. No. If things were really that simple, would the streamer and her friends still be so conflicted here? Obviously, the 4 people present could use their intelligence to crush the idle viewers in the streaming room. If even these idle fish in the water could understand, how could they not? In the end, her old friend Lao Siji Lianmeng told her what Jiang Pengji was conflicted about and embarrassed about. Lao Siji Lianmeng, going to rescue the emperor? There are benefits, but there are also disadvantages. The disadvantage is that Qingde County has not been conquered yet. There are still restless local aristocrats in Shangyang County that have not been completely tamed. If something goes wrong in the process of rescuing the emperor, the streamer's nest will be in danger. Not going to rescue the emperor? Even better, the Dongqing royal family is not finished yet. This can be seen from their imperial edict to rescue the emperor. The streamer disobeys the imperial edict and solidifies the title of a rebel and a traitor. When the time comes, If the Dongqing royal family makes a comeback, the streamer will be the first to be dealt with. Of course, if the comeback fails and Prince Changsho ascends to the throne, Prince Changsho will still target Jiang Pingji, disobeys the imperial edict, and rejects the imperial edict. What else could she be if not a rebel and a traitor? There was science and analysis in the streaming room, but most of it was the bullet screen of bored onlookers. After looking around, Jiang Pingji didn't find anything useful. She pursed her lips and continued to close the bullet screen. On the other side, the three strategists had already reached a tacit agreement in their hearts. Wei Xi had mingled with the bandit Jiang Pingji in his previous life. Under the influence of what he saw and heard, his heart was even more free than Feng Zhen's. For example, at this moment, Feng Zhen was still limited by his old way of thinking, but Wei Xi had an idea. However, the idea he gave was ingenious, but to put it bluntly, it was really a bluntly idea. My lord, I think there is no conflict in this matter. Wei Xi thought about it and said, My lord wants to rescue the emperor, but you're afraid that it will delay the battle against Qingde County in the spring of next year. If that's the case, why not take Qingde County in advance? Maybe we can even make it in time for the spring plowing next year. Chapter 619. War in Winter. Brother, it will be the new year soon. Have you checked the almanac? Do you know what New Year means? Wasn't there supposed to be 7 days off during the New Year? Eaten by a dog? If they started the war in winter, even if it was a blitzkrieg, they would not be able to take it down without 2 to 3 months. This meant that they had to fight until the beginning of spring. If they were lucky, they would spend the new year in their tents. If they were unlucky, they would have to go to war. While other people were having New Year's Eve dinner, they were chopping off people's heads and lingering with the dead. Feng Zhen imagined the scene after Qingde County was conquered and felt a throbbing pain in his chest. His eyes rolled back and he let out a short and exaggerated ah before collapsing onto the carpet. Because he was born with a weak constitution, coupled with the hanshi powder he consumed after courting death, Feng Zhen's face was pale. Looking at his sickly appearance, it really looked like he was suffering from an illness and was extremely agitated. However, he could deceive others but not Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji didn't seem to understand. She asked him directly, Where did you go the past few days? Did your kidneys become weak? He couldn't even sit properly. Wasn't that because his back was hurting and his kidney was weak? Feng Zhen almost choked on his breath. He had no choice but to put on an expression that said he would rather die than live. He crawled up with his dead fish eyes wide open. Ever since he arrived at the Black Den, where all the jackals, wolves, tigers and leopards gathered, he did not even take hanshi powder. He also quit drinking alcohol, not to mention going out to look for girls. Sob, sob, sob. The Lord even slandered him for having a weak kidney. Feng Zhen felt extremely wronged. My lord, isn't it inappropriate to start a war in the middle of winter? First of all, it's close to the new year. The soldiers will be reunited with their families. If we were to separate at this time, it would be too cruel. Second of all, it's a world of ice and snow. The snow has sealed off the mountains. It's difficult for the troops to march. The soldiers are tired and the horses are tired. It's really not suitable to mobilize the troops. Today was an agricultural society, and the timing of a war was closely related to the agricultural fields. Spring required spring plowing. If they delayed spring plowing because of the war, this year's harvest would be gone. Wouldn't they have nothing to eat next year? Summer crops are planted in summer. The crops are not yet ripe, and the weather is unbearably hot. This is also not a good season for fighting. The winters were extremely cold, especially in the northern regions. Snow and ice filled the air, and the conditions for marching and fighting were extremely difficult. Whether it was offense or defense, fighting in winter was simply asking for trouble. Along the way, the most suitable time to start the war was after the spring plowing, before the summer planting, after the autumn harvest, and before the midwinter. These 2 periods of time were neither hot nor cold, suitable for stirring up trouble. What about now? It would be the new year in a few days. Was the weather suitable for fighting? Feng Zhen's words were not unreasonable, But the current situation was unique, and they had no choice but to fight. Feng Jin automatically ignored the clown Feng Zhen. At first, he didn't have a good impression of this prodigal son. But after getting to know him better, he wasn't that annoying. Especially when Feng Zhen also experienced the pain of working overtime, and looked like he was better off dead. Feng Jin's heart felt unusually balanced. He cupped his hands and bowed, then stepped out of the ranks to report. I think that Zixiao's suggestion is a good plan. Our lord has a good governance. This year's autumn harvest has been pretty good. The district headquarters granary is already full of rice, and there is no shortage of provisions in the military camp. It was currently the 12th lunar month of the year, but the soldiers were diligent in their training and could be considered as elites. If a battle were to break out, they wouldn't lose much of their combat strength. Furthermore, woolen shirts were very popular. Every soldier had 2 sets to change into. In addition, the lord had assigned them leather armor. Even in today's weather, marching and fighting wouldn't be hindered. I think that this plan is feasible. Fighting in the middle of winter was indeed difficult, but everything had its pros and cons. Their soldiers had a hard time attacking in the winter, but the Red Lotus group had a hard time defending. If the wind and snow were compared to a negative state, Jiang Pingji's army would be weakened by 10%, while the Red Lotus group would be weakened by 50%. Why did he say that? Listen to the analysis. Jiang Pingji had many captives. After screening, most of them were thrown to Xiangyang district to mine iron ore. She found craftsmen who could smelt iron and craftsmen who could make armor. She used the current armor specifications as a reference and designed a set of military equipment. While ensuring safety and defense, she tried to reduce the load as much as possible and save more materials to make more armor and weapons. Excluding the nearly 10,000 new recruits recruited in Xiangyang County, most of the original 20,000 soldiers were wearing armor with defensive functions. Their weapons were standardized and could be considered elites. On the other hand, most of the members of the Red Lotus group were dressed in rags and had zero defense. They had all kinds of weapons in their hands: long sticks, kitchen knives, axes, carrying poles, choppers. Some even held stones, but most of them were barehanded. In terms of numbers, the 100,000 members of the Red Lotus group were indeed terrifying. In terms of combat power, with the quality of the Red Lotus group, the elites on Jiang Pingji's side could fight 1 against 10. They were both fighting in winter, but their side had the absolute upper hand, not to mention that she had an insider like in Shui. For the sake of 7 days of rest, Feng Zhen still wanted to struggle a little. But, Wei Xi added, my lord has specially chosen the cold winter and hot summer days to train her troops. Fighting in winter is indeed difficult, but it's not impossible to fight. Feng Zhen was in complete despair. Feng Jin continued, if we can conquer Qingda County before the beginning of spring, we can still make it in time for the spring plowing. If the spring plowing went smoothly, it meant that there was hope for this year's harvest. The food in Wanzhou was enough to support them in any battle. Wei Xi said with a smile, if we can conquer all of Wanzhou before the rescue of the emperor, perhaps my lord's title will become Wanzhou's governor. In terms of military strength, Jiang Pingji was definitely in the top 3 among those who came to rescue the emperor. The emperor of Dongqing had a favor to ask, so he had to give her some benefits. Jiang Pingji was already the de facto governor of Wanzhou. If the emperor gave her some benefits, it would most likely be to make her legitimate. She was the only governor of a province who was younger than 20 years old. Not to mention Dongqing. Even in the previous dynasty Xia, there might not be a second governor like her. Feng Jin raised his eyebrows, and a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. According to this rhythm, the situation would be very good. Chongzhou and Wanzhou shared a border. Together with Hu County, when Lu Shi retired behind the scenes, it meant that Jiang Pingji would occupy 1/3 of Dongqing's territory. The biggest threat was that the northern borderline had suffered a great loss of vitality due to the horse plague and was unable to move south. No one could stop Jiang Pingji from expanding her territory. Feng Zhen raised his hand to his forehead and muttered, I'm still thinking about the 7 days of rest during the new year. Wei Xi said in a low voice, You can rest when you're done. Feng Zhen snorted coldly. If I believe you again, I'll read the 2 words Feng Zhen backwards. The conversation between the two could not be hidden from Jiang Pingji's ears. She ruthlessly stabbed Feng Zhen in the heart. Zisher is all alone, and he doesn't have any beautiful wives or concubines at home. Whether it's the New Year holiday or not, isn't he always alone? Feng Zhen. My lord, this is hurtful. Although he is single, this is not an excuse to swallow his vacation. Jiang Pingji cruelly exposed the truth and placed the bloody truth in front of Feng Zhen. She said, moreover, there are 7 days of rest during the new year. All the entertainment venues are closed. Where are you going to find entertainment? You'll still be home alone. It's so boring. If you're busy with government affairs, at least the chef can prepare 3 meals a day for you. Go home. Are you planning to starve to death at home? Feng Zhen. No matter how desperate Feng Zhen was, the war in the winter had become a reality. In less than 2 days, Feng Zhen knocked his head on the table that was piled up like a mountain and said weakly, You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.